in Sydney and California.
No complaints, no complaints at all. It's good.
So we are still waiting for the Dean to deliver the speech before we start our session. Okay, sorry for this waiting.
Mary, you're on a spotlight now. So
I am. I have it on gallery view.
Yeah, they also have these new things called the immersive view, but I think we are too many for an immersive view. So I sometimes use it for my class, but it's a bit strange.
Yes. Ahmar, were you just in Belfast?
Yeah, I was. That was my first face-to-face conference since COVID.
How was it?
Yes, and it's still, I've been back for 2 weeks, but I haven't recovered from my jet lag still. It's just crazy. Have you been to any face-to-face conferences?
Yes, I went to one a few months ago, actually, in Seattle, and I was in Vietnam for 3 weeks as an English language specialist in August. So
Yeah, I saw that.
I got COVID at the end of that.
Oh gosh.
So I came back and had to get over COVID. So that was a lot to get over. Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy. How was Vietnam?
It was wonderful. We had we did workshops on translanguaging, and we went to 5 cities. And it was the next to the last city where they said, "Oh, you've been exposed to COVID in the classroom." We're like, "Okay." Yeah, I got it.
We are live in this new world that we live in.
Yeah. But it was a great experience. I enjoyed it. Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't been to Asia since COVID. Just before COVID hit, I was on pretty much a world tour. I did all of South America for lectures. Then I was in Pakistan for a couple of months. I went across from south to north, east to west, everywhere. Philippines, did about 20 different cities across Philippines. Then I was in Bangladesh, then Malaysia, and then I came back, and then COVID hit, and that was it. Changed my life.
Yeah,
I think it changed a lot of people's life, and I am actually kind of happy in the opportunity it gave me to sort of. I know that it wasn't good for everybody, but let me escape Sydney and move to the bush and live out with my indigenous family and just experience a whole different life. Years I could do remote teaching. I didn't have to be in Sydney. I actually just got back to Sydney recently because we are back to face-to-face teaching now.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, I used this as a way to escape reality and escape urbanity.
Yeah.
And in many ways, it's become really hard for me to readjust to urban life. I'm a total misfit now. I can't do urbanity anymore. I was living off grid, so I had no electric power other than some solar power for charging my equipment. I had no running water, so either I drank river water or I collected rainwater. That was it.
Wow.
But I was still in an area where there were a lot of tourists, so I had 4G reception, so which meant I could still work.
Oh. I had sabbatical in the spring. So I was supposed to do my sabbatical in Myanmar, but then the coup and COVID and everything, but I still had a good research experience from home. So
yeah, everything has changed. How are things in Myanmar right now?
really bad. Yeah. My research assistant is from China, Kachin, and they're having a lot of fighting there. He's in a war zone. When he came, he was in the midst of that. But yeah, so our research, we interviewed 14 activists. Basically, there's no universities now. All the professors have left. They joined to protest the government, and they were working for the government. So now they don't have jobs. So it's really hard. I've been doing lectures online for free for many of the students in Myanmar. Yeah.
Yeah. It's tough everywhere at the moment.
Yeah.
I don't know of a single place where you can say that things are good. You know, I mean, when I was in Belfast, I mean, you can still see the remnant, the marks of the troubles. You can still see the economic depression, other than the sort of touristy area in the center, everything is sort of run down. There's still buildings. I learned from friends that they cannot, they can't, if they leave their apartment or their house, they have to make sure all the windows and doors are locked. That's not good. I mean, here in Sydney, that's not, I mean, where I live in Sydney, it's not that bad. I can actually leave my house with my doors open, totally open. And no, I don't feel unsafe at all. Nobody's going to come in or steal anything. But in other parts of the world, that's not the case.
Yeah.
I mean, I was in New York for a couple of months to help with my mom's surgery. And, I've lived in New York on and off for 20, 25 years, but this time around, it was depressing. My brother lives on 42nd Street and 2nd Avenue. So it's, a good suburb in Manhattan, but just like his building is nice, but as soon as you come out, just the number of homeless people, just the trash around the city, it's just dirty. The smell of pee and human waste on the street corners, it's disgusting. It's just like I was surprised. I was like, this is not the New York I knew.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pakistan is drowning with the floods.
Oh.
A third of the country is underwater and has been for months now.
Wow.
All right. Sorry for interrupting both of you. Can we start the
Sure.
right now?
There is a reason we are here.
Sorry, it's very interesting hearing the stories from both of you. That is interesting. Yeah. Okay, can we start now? All right. Okay.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin wa bihi nasta'in ala umurid dunya waddin. Assalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya wa imamil mursalin sayyidina wa maulana Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. The Honorable Director of Tarbiyah Faculty, Professor Dr. Haji Abdurrohman Kasdi, LC M.Si. The Honorable the Dean of Tarbiyah Faculty, Dr. Muhammad Nur Ghufron, M.Si, and Vice Deans of Tarbiyah Faculty. The Honorable the Chair of English Education Department, Mrs. Taranania Zohi, M.Pd. The Honorable the Speakers, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let's praise our Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, the creator and the sustainer of the universe. Peace be upon Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the last messenger of Allah who has guided you alive from the distraction of the right way of Islam. On behalf of the organizers We would like to extend a warm welcome to our speakers. For the first,
Tapi nanti presentasi.
Dr. Ahmar Mahboob, Degree Coordinator, Master of Cross-Cultural and Applied Linguistics, the University of Sydney. The second speaker, Miss Mary Shepard Wong, Ph.D., Director, Department of Global Student Sociology and TESOL, Azusa Pacific University. I'm Nabila. It is an awesome and precious chance for me to be your Master of Ceremony in this morning on Wednesday, 21st September 2022, in our big event, the Second International Conference 2022 of English Education Department, with the theme Revealing Spirituality Value in English Language Teaching. The Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, before we start our agenda for the day, there will be reciting the Holy Quran. For Sister Nila Maherini, as reciter of Holy Quran, the blessed place is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا قيل لكم تفسحوا في المجالس إذا قيل تفسحوا في المجالس فافسح الله لكم. وإذا قيل اشعثوا فاشعثوا يرفع الله الذين آمنوا منكم والذين أوتوا العلم درجات والله بما تعملون خبير والله بما تعملون خبير صدق الله العظيم. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi.
Thank you to Sister Nilam. The Honorable, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, to honor our country, please let us all rise for the listening of the national anthem Indonesia Raya. Please the audience to stand up. Please, you two sit on your seat. Ladies and gentlemen, now we move to the next agenda. This is a welcoming speech as well as opening remark by the Dean of Tarbiyah Faculty. Dr. Nur Ghufron, M.Si, please proceed to the stage.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. From Tarbiyah Faculty of IAIN Kudus, I am honored to welcome our keynote speakers, Associate Professor Ahmar Mahboob from the University of Sydney, and Mary Shepard Wong, Ph.D. from Azusa Pacific University, all faculty and department members, honorable presenters, participants in this international event, beloved students. Praise be to Allah, the Lord of universe, and prayer and peace be upon the Prophet Muhammad, his family, and all of his companions. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a real pleasure for me to welcome you at this international conference on English teaching and learning issues entitled Revealing Spirituality Values in English Language Teaching. Today, everybody will discuss different issues and challenges facing the Muslim nation. You are most welcome, guests and scholars, and we at Tarbiyah faculty hold respect and appreciation. Ladies and gentlemen, let's together officially open this event by reciting Basmalah together. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We do hope this will make everything running well. My thanks again to all of you for sharing this special moment and attention. Enjoy the event. Please forget me. Have a nice day, and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you to Dr. Nur Ghufron, M.Si. Well, for opening this conference, now the second international conference on English teaching is officially open. Ladies and gentlemen, the next agenda is closing. The end of its opening ceremony, the committee want to thank to all participants of this ceremony. From me, the last I say, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
All right. Thank you so much for the opening ceremony. And here I will continue as a moderator for first session. Firstly, I'd like to say welcome to this second international conference on teaching and learning issues that is organized by Institut Agama Islam Negeri Kudus, Indonesia. And I also welcome to all presenters who have submitted their papers related to the topic and the theme for this international conference. And I also want to welcome our two amazing and also inspiring speakers today, Associate Professor Dr. Ahmar Mahboob and also Dr. Mary Shepard Wong, who have wanted to share their knowledge and also experience dealing with the topic for today's international conference. So here, it is very interesting that we will discuss about the topic of revealing spirituality values in English language teaching, because there are so many things that can be discussed through this topic itself. Because when I read the book edited by Mary and also Ahmar, which is discussed about this, published in 2018, it is about spirituality and also ELT, and it's something new for us. And according to that book, that actually spirituality can be also identified into or linked into three different things of language teachers. The first is their professional identities, and then their pedagogical practices, and the last for language learning itself. It is very interesting because according to my experience, I am an English teacher, English lecturer here, I have a different identities. So I am not only an English teacher, but because I teach in Islamic-based higher education institution, it means that some people think that I may have a little bit understanding or maybe understanding about Islamic teachings or Islamic values itself. It is also maybe occurred for other lectures that they teach in religious-based institutions. So this may change our professional identity as an ELT teacher. And then secondly, our pedagogical practices. Of course, this theme is selected or is opted is not only about for general reasons, but we have a specific reasons here. So Professor Ahmar and Professor Mary, why we choose this kind of theme, spirituality? Because our institution, our higher education institution here, we are under the Ministry of Religious Affairs, which is we have a priority program for religious moderation for this period. So it means that we have to instill, we have to teach, we have also include in the curriculum that spirituality itself can be taught or can be embedded in the classroom. So this will maybe probably change or maybe shift our pedagogical practices. And the last, the language learning. Should we put this kind of religious teaching or maybe spirituality within our teaching contents or not? How is the boundaries? How far can we go through that issues? It will challenge ourselves as an English language teacher. So it is very interesting to know from the perspectives of you about this topic because you are the experts of this theme. And firstly, I'd like to welcome Associate Professor Ahmar for the first delivering presentation here. And before I ask Professor Ahmar to start or to deliver the his board presentation, I'd like to read the curriculum vitae of Professor Ahmar. So Professor Ahmar Mahboob currently teach in University of Sydney, and he got his Bachelor of Art in Karachi, Pakistan, Master of Arts from Karachi, Pakistan, and then Master of Arts from Indiana University, and Master of Education from Sydney University. And last, he got his PhD in 2003 from Indiana University, Bloomington, United States, with a dissertation topic of the status of non-native English speakers as ESL teachers in the United States. So Professor Ahmar is keenly interested in the application of language sciences to developmental issues. His primary research interest is on an examination of policies, practices, and implication of language variation in local or global context. And in 2019, Professor Ahmar was named as Australia's research field leader under the specialty or the major of English language and literature in the Australian Research magazine. Oh, it's impressive. And then he also became an editor of TESOL Quarterly Journal, a well-known journal in English language teaching from 2014 to 2017. And also, he wrote more than 55 books, or chapter books, and also more than 38 journal articles. With one of among them is the World Anglicism in the Middle East and North Africa, that was published in 2021. So, without further ado, today Professor Ahmar will deliver the presentation about language, learning, and symbols. So, Professor Ahmar, can you the
Thank
time
you
is
so
yours. Can you
much.
start your presentation? All right. Sorry for the
Thank you so
long
much.
introduction. All right.
You know, now I'm under pressure, right? with that introduction, it always, sort of puts you into pressure when you hear so many things about yourself. Thank you so much. I'll go straight into the talk. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for being here so early in the morning in Indonesia. I mean, for me, it's almost noon time, but for you guys, it's still very early. And depending on which part of Indonesia you are in, it might be different places altogether. So let me move straight on and go into a slide share. All right, cool. Things are starting to happen. And here we go. All right. So you guys should be able to see my screen.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it's clear.
All right, good. Okay. So notice you're listening to three people. You're listening to Ahmar Mahboob, which is my birth name. You're listening to Sunny Boy Brumby, which is my indigenous Australian Aboriginal name. And you're listening to Prof Nomad. It's one of the names that I use for writing. Now, each one of them has a different history, but they're all me. So when we talk about symbols, using names is an aspect of using symbols. Using language is symbolic. Religion is all about symbols, right? So we need to really understand what symbols are. And that is partly what we will talk about most of the day today in my session. And to do this, you introduced me as somebody who does language and literature, which is very true. And when I say language and literature, I do a lot of poetry. So today's talk is going to be actually very poetic in nature. I'm actually going to read a number of my poems, and then we will talk through them to see how they relate to the theme of language, learning, and symbols. Poetry, of course, is highly symbolic, right? It's all metaphors. So the first one I want to read is called language. This is actually a definition of language, but in poetry. Like computer languages program machines, human language programs people. And while we do have other senses, language can shape how we use those too. Language co-evolved with where she grew, with lands, creatures, and seasons she knew. Our elders learned all that was needed and taught it to us through boli and practice. The flow of sounds, the melodies of song, the rhythm of knowledge, the grammars of dance, the meaning of colors, the semantics of smell, the discourse of flavors, sense of touch. A harmonic system in a mystical garden. All that changed when our tongue was cut, our laws replaced by foreign words, our knowledge drowned in information floods, our wisdom is stolen through tests and books, our traditions slaughtered by fads and trends, our integrity replaced with greed and wants, our humanity turned into an infectious wound. An agitated system in a turbulent existence. Now, we can actually just expand this single poem for the whole hour, because everything we need to understand about language and language teaching and language learning and the power of symbols is here. And I especially want you guys to focus on the second part of all that changed when our tongue was cut. Now, in Indonesia, you were colonized by the Dutch. In Pakistan, South Asia, we were colonized by the English. Different histories in different parts. Certain parts of Asia were colonized by the French, others by the Spanish. Whatever the European nation was that colonized us, essentially did something very similar. They changed our ways of doing things. They changed our ways of creating knowledge. They changed the way that we created our laws and systems by putting in something else. And through that, they broke our connection with our own past and created something new that we live in today. So in many ways, We don't really live in a world where our own ancestry, our own heritage contributes to our legal frameworks or social frameworks. Now, how was that done? I'll read you another point. This is called splendid, simply splendid. Now, this is a flag in the background that you see is a flag of the British East India Company. In the context of Indonesia, you would have had the Dutch East India Company, right? So different country, European colonizing country, but very similar ideas. It's called splendid, it's simply splendid. We start off this poem in the 1850s. Sir, the danger is increasing. The natives are resisting. How ignorant, how savage. They don't appreciate our attempts to salvage. How can they know what's best for them? Let's save them in our God's name. Burn their books, destroy their past. Let us teach them what we want. Introduce money, buy us friends, give some wealth and lots of lands. Teach people religion, to hate each other, break their union into different nations, create new symbols, build new systems, change the ways they think and function. When this is done, come back to me and I will tell you what next can be. We move into the 1940s, which is where my part of the world got independence, so-called. Sir, I am pleased to report our progress. Your directives have brought us success. The natives are divided and broken. They're killing each other in dozens. It's splendid, simply splendid. And now for the next bits. Let us retire to our beautiful estate. Let our friends govern their new states. With our stories to guide their future, we can relax and let them suffer. Sell them books and let them know if they want progress, they can come for more. Invite some natives, give them means, turn them into posters for the rest to dream. When this is done, it will be seen. Those who fought us now fight in between. Splendid, simply splendid. Notice here again, in this little poem, we refer to so many things, burning their books, destroying their power. This is essentially what happened to us during colonization. We lost connection with our own histories. The Europeans replaced our writing systems. So for example, most of the indigenous writing systems were replaced by phonemic systems. For example, in the Philippines, all the indigenous writing systems used to be syllabic. They were destroyed and replaced by phonemic systems, which are created by linguists, right? In Indonesia, you guys will know better. In my part of the world, the same boli, the same sound system, the same speech was turned into Hindi and Urdu. And that led to a conflict. What was that divided on? Based on writing systems, not speech. We need to therefore understand what language is, to understand how a manipulation of symbols can lead to differences and divisions, and how these divisions create conflict and oppression. Need to think around all of these things. Now, as we know, just as I say here, let us retire to our beautiful estate. We are not directly colonized anymore, but we are still manipulated and controlled and managed. How? With our stories to guide their future. We can relax and let them suffer. Sell them books and let them know. If they want progress, they can come for more. This is the root of modern day colonization, because our approaches to making knowledge are compromised. We don't have our own ways in which we can create knowledge anymore. Those are gone. They've been destroyed. And so we are dependent on colonial ways of creating knowledge, which we will talk about. And that means essentially we're still colonized. Now, that means in a sense that it's not the sword that is ruling us. It's not the guns, it's not the direct power. It is the pen that is using us. So here's a poem that I wrote for children. The artwork is by a friend. Papa, what does this mean? Little Guddu asked one day as he was reading. The pen is mightier than the sword. How can that be, Papa? Is it a sword stronger than a pen? Good question, Guddu. Let us think about it this way. If I force you not to leave your room, you may stay there. Ah, no, I will find a way to escape. Little Guddu added with a laugh. Yes. Now, imagine that I tell you, there is a treasure hidden in your room. Wow, really? I will find it for sure. Yes, of course you will, Guddu. And while you do that, you will stay in the room. Yes. So what was more powerful? What made you stay in the room? I see. Words can do things that force can't. Aren't you such a clever little person, little Guddu? This is what has happened to us. Through the books, through the pen, we have been essentially manipulated into living the life that creates oppression within us and in our communities. We destroy our environment. We damage other things. We kill other life forms. And yet we keep the symbols of faith and religion. Symbols, not actions. Now, how is this done? This is done in a number of different ways. And to really understand it, we need to create and shift our own ways of knowledge making. We need to go to ground zero and rethink what knowledge is. We need to go to ground zero and think about how do we create knowledge? What is it that we understand about the world? And in doing that, it doesn't take us very long to realize we don't actually know what the real world is. We just have assumptions around it by thinking about it in certain ways. And as our ways of thinking change, our understanding of the world changes. And as our understanding of the world changes, our relationship with the world changes. So for example, your ancestors and my ancestors did not used to go mining. They wouldn't dig out and kill plants and things to create big farms. They wouldn't dig out resources from the earth and burn it up as oil. They didn't do it because their perception or conception of what the world was very different to what it has become today. Now, how do we fix this? We have to sort of, as I said, go back to ground zero. Now, at this point, I'll ask you a question. You know, in the world that we live in, if you are looking at this material world, things that, you know, are made of material, and I were to ask you, what's the smallest unit in the material world? What is the smallest little bit, you know, that we can all agree on? That's the smallest part of a material. Now, the answer is an atom, right? An atom. We all know that. It's an atom. Yes, of course, an atom can be subparts, can be subdivided, it can be broken up, but we all sort of agree that that atom is the basic component that's used to create the world. And everybody agrees on it. All the scientists agree on it. It doesn't matter if you're a chemist or a biologist, everybody agrees. So all across the sciences or hard sciences, there is an agreement that the building block of the universe is an atom. And then all the scientists manipulate all of it in order to achieve things, in order to create things. Now, if I were to ask you a question, what is the parallel of an atom in social systems? So if the material world, which is of course material, is made of atoms, then what is the non-material world made of? The non-material world is stuff that is in our minds. What we know, what we think, what we understand, what we believe in. That's the non-material world. Of course, the two interact. But what is the building block of the non-material world? And guess what? We are never taught that. So that is what we have to start with. We have to start with understanding what the building blocks of the non-material world are. And let me share that with you. So if we look at the material biological world on the one hand, And a socio-semiotic world, on the other hand, of course, the material biological world is the world that is made out of matter. It has a physical existence. And the socio-semiotic world is not made of matter. It doesn't have physical existence. It exists within our minds. Now, the material biological world, as we said, is comprised of particles called atoms. This is the tricky thing here. This is why the talk today is called Language, Learning, and Symbols, because the socio-semiotic world, all of it, it's made of non-particles called symbols. So whether we are looking at language, that's made of symbols, whether we are looking at culture, it's about symbols. Whether we look at mathematics, numbers and operators are symbols. Whether we look at religion, religion has so many symbols. Everything that exists in the human mind, everything is comprised of symbols. Now, because they operate on symbols, mathematics doesn't work on them. These are symbolic relationships. So numbers and mathematics can operate to understand how we have the material world, right? So I can say, I have got 1 glass of water, I can have 2 glasses of water, because these are material things. I can say, I've got 1 dog here, I have 2 dogs, I've got 3 dogs. I can say, I've got 1 apple, 2 apples, 3 apples. These are material things. But when we look at the socio-semiotic world, mathematics doesn't operate. Why? Because mathematics is also a creation of the humans. Numbers don't exist outside the human mind. We create numbers. Even the history of zero, if you look at zero, the history of zero is only 5,000 years old. Only 5,000 years. Humans have been around for a very long time. Numbers are recent. And numbers, just like literacy, like reading and writing, are the tools, are the need of the trading classes. It's not the need of everybody. They don't need, not everybody needs them. Of course, in today's world, we can't imagine living a life without literacy and numeracy. Everything is dependent on it. But in an indigenous system, in a nomadic way of life, you don't need to count. You don't need to read and write. There's no need. So all across Australia, the indigenous languages here, they did not have counting systems. They did not have writing systems. Why would they? There is no need. It's only if you are doing you're trading that you need to do all of these things. If you're a nomad, you live in the bush, either you've got mangoes or you don't have mangoes. You have some mangoes, you have a lot of mangoes, or you have no mangoes, because they are right there in your presence. But if you're a trader and you want to trade things, then you need to keep account, you need to keep records. So notice, mathematics actually is a human construct. And because it's a socio-semiotic system, it actually cannot work to understand other socio-semiotic systems. It just doesn't work. Yet at the same time, look at our own research practices, including my own PhD dissertation. How many of us do surveys? We survey this, we survey that, we survey this, we survey that. We teach our students to do surveys. All of it is numbers. And then we use that in policy making, in thinking about issues. That's a fallacy. It's a fallacy because numbers, mathematics do not operate in socio-semiotic world. It's a fallacy. And so we create knowledge using mechanisms that mislead us and trick us. They trick us into doing things that shouldn't be done. That is part of the reason we create oppressive societies. Now, the material biological world can exist may exist or may not exist without the humans. So for example, dogs can exist without human interference. But of course, to make a glass, we need humans to do this. So you can have the existence of the material biological world may or may not be dependent on humans. But the socio-semiotic world for humans, and let me point out that all creatures have socio-semiotic worlds. An ant has its own. Any living thing that interacts and engages with the real world has its own ways of understanding that world. So I can only talk about how humans can do things because we are humans. But we should never forget that other living organisms have their own ways of creating knowledge. their own ways of understanding things, their own belief structures, whatever they might be. We don't know because we can't think like a duck. But their existence of social semiotics are dependent on the biological creature. It cannot exist without the material biological creature. Now, if I want to make a change in the material biological world, I have to use force. I have to pick up a class, means I have to take action to do that. It can't happen by itself. But things that are socio-semiotic don't require material force, right? That is why the pen is mightier than the sword, because we can turn beliefs into things that people will share, and through their beliefs, they will take certain actions or they will not take certain actions. So by manipulating the beliefs of a community, of the people, you actually change the ways that they will function. This is the trick of the colonials, and it continues to exist today. Now, this is also hopeful because this is where we have some redemption, because if we can fix our symbolic systems and we can fix our symbols, we can change the way that we engage with the world and we can reharmonize. So there is a possibility of reformation through all of this. And that's important to remember, you know, that we can reform things by understanding how symbols operate. The change, the way things change in the material world are principles of the material biological world. But for symbols, for the socio-semiotic world, changes can happen for any time, for any reason. And that's a good news because we can actually influence change. We can make things better than they are. And then finally, notice that the material, this is the instruction, the way that the structure of a university is. When we look at the faculty of science, we see they will study things like physics and chemistry and biology, things that have to do with atoms. And then when we are doing with the socio-semiotic world, we put them in disciplines like sociology and linguistics and economics and religious studies and all of this. But notice here, there is no reason to actually divide these disciplines. There is no reason. There is no reason for having different departments of sociology and linguistics and economics and religious studies and cultural studies and gender studies and anthropology. The list can keep going on. We don't need them. Why? Because they all operate on the same principle. They're all symbolic systems, all of them. Language is symbols, religion is symbol, culture is symbol, money is symbol, everything is symbols. So we don't actually need all these departments. The departments and the way that exist is the principle of divide and rule. Divide and rule was not just a political theory or a political structure. Divide and rule exists within the very ways in which we create knowledge today. We create knowledge by dividing and ruling. Because we don't talk about symbols and how symbols operate across all social sciences, across all socio-semiotics. So instead, what do? We divide people. We turn some people into linguists, some people into sociologists, some people into anthropologists, some people into economists, some people into religious scholars, some people into all of these things. That's divide and rule, because we have been divided through the structure of the university. So as part of your agenda as Islamic University, I think it's extremely important that you work with your university administration and redo all the disciplinary divisions. There is no need for them. All we need is a single program on all social semiotics. Everything sits there. Economics sits there, language, it's just a focus. We focus on different aspects, but they all operate in the same way. All of them. Just like in the material world, it's atoms. All the material world, all the biological world operates on atoms. Similarly, all of the socio-semiotic world operates on symbolic relationships, all of it, no exceptions. Once we start to realize this and we start to see the power of this, we can alter our own universities, we can alter the way we create knowledge, we can alter the way we write things, everything changes. And through that, we can create reharmonization of our communities. Because when our belief systems are manipulated, we break down. Let's think of this in a poem, in a poetic way. Religions, what practices, actions, acts of sharing, of caring, of being human. Along came the preachers, turning actions into things, naming divisions of oppression. Today, religions lie in the books, something to own, something to fight about. Actions lost, symbols take control, tokens of belief to be had, no matter how they are gotten. Long gone are the practices that harmonized and healed. Today, owning symbols is religion. Now, I was born in Pakistan, you know. I understand the power of religion, the power of divisions. First was the division between Hindus and Muslims that created Pakistan and India, based also on the division of the script, Hindi and Urdu. Same speech, same boli, two writing systems, symbols. Then within Pakistan, you have Shias, you have Sunnis, you have this group, you have that group. Religious violence happens every day on the street. Notice people have big beards, they have hijab, they have all these coverings, but their actions are horrible. They cheat each other, they lie to each other, they steal from each other, they physically harm other people and creatures. In Islam, we've got the concept of hukuk al-ibad. You know that, right? Hukuk al-ibad. The hukuk means the rights of the creatures, of all things. And that is actually more important within the religion of Islam, hukuk al-ibad. It's very clear in the Quran and Sunnah that if you don't pray, or if you don't fast, or if you don't perform the rituals of Islam, Allah can still forgive you, because that's between you and God. That's between you and Allah. He can forgive you. But if you violate hukuk al-ibad, there is no forgiveness from Allah. The forgiveness can only come from the creature that you have hurt. And look at what we do. We have all the symbols and no practice. We hurt animals. We kill the forests. We kill the fish. That's the violation of hukuk al-ibad. We violate the hukuk al-ibad, and yet we maintain the symbols. That's the problem, right? Notice the manipulation of symbols. Religion is about action, about performance, the performance of integrity and honesty. When you have integrity and honesty, it doesn't matter who the other person is. You will not harm them, not because of them, because of you. Because if you harm them, then your integrity becomes compromised. You won't cheat on them. You won't lie to them. Because if you lie to them, if you cheat them, then your integrity becomes compromised. It's a performance of integrity. It's an action. It's a performance. When we take away the performance and replace it by symbols and tokenisms, we get disasters. We live in a world where we can see it happening all over. And that is something we really need to take into account and rethink all of this. It's the practice and action of integrity and honesty that we need, nothing else. Once you have that, everything becomes okay again. Now, how can this happen? How can we be so confused by all of this? One of the ways this is done is because in the colonial educational practices that we have studied and essentially, accepted, we can create a division between the human mind and the body. So body-mind distinction, the duality, which is essentially the foundations of how universities are structured. Sciences are body or material, and the mind is the socio-semiotics, social sciences. The division that is institutionalized within our university structures, within our medical profession, within our, all of these things. That institutionalization, when we are sick with a medical condition like COVID or something, we have to go to a doctor. When we have stress, we go to a psychologist. We divide ourselves. Notice how often you can see that it just replicates itself in the ways that we live. Whether it's the university structure, the medical structure, we divide it. We create a division between the mind and the body. Once we accept that division between the mind and the body, guess what can happen? Our mind can be tricked. It can be tricked in a lot of different ways. And we will look at some of them in just a bit. But before that, one more poem. Papa, you know what? And before I could respond, little Guddu went on. I discovered something, Papa. What, Guddu? I asked. I don't control my body. My body controls me. How did you discover that, Guddu? I wondered aloud. Because I cannot tell my body when to be hungry, when to be thirsty, when to be sleepy, and when to be poopy. He giggled as he said the last bit, and then continued. My body tells me, and then I do. Wow, yeah, Guddu, you're right. How come I never thought like that? You're so clever, Guddu. Come, let's go out for a walk. What Guddu understands here, many of us never do. Our mind and body are always integrated. They're never separated. There is no action that is not connected to our beliefs. What we say, that's why surveys are useless. Because it's the actions that speak louder than words. We can see things happening. We can observe performance. We don't know what is in the written word. When we read a book, how do we know if it's telling us the truth or not? But if a person cannot perform in front of us, we know they cannot perform. Imagine this. If you wanted to learn to play a musical instrument, you wouldn't just go read a book. You will find somebody who can perform music, who can play the instruments. And then because they can play them, they can teach us. So it's a performer, an expert who is our teacher, somebody who can do things, not just talk about them, somebody who can perform. Think about it this way. How many courses do we have on academic writing today? Literally hundreds of thousands of courses people take and people teach. Academic writing, academic publication writing, writing for publication. Now ask this, how many of the teachers who teach these courses can actually publish themselves? How many of these teachers who teach us academic writing can actually do academic writing? And if they cannot publish, if they cannot write, then how can be the teachers? How? Because they're using a book to teach us. Imagine this, all of our schools, our math teacher is not a mathematician. Our science teacher is not a scientist. None of those teachers are experts. Our language teachers are not experts in language. They can't create literature. And yet they're all teachers. That's the problem. When we have non-performers become teachers, then we can't expect our students and the young ones to be able to perform. How will they? They never learned from a good performer. It's only when you learn from the experts that you learn how to do things. So learning happens through engagement in practice. And the practice is led by people who know how to perform. How can all of this be altered in our current work? It's because we create the mind-body split. We think of our body as separate from our mind, and we think our mind controls the body. No, it doesn't. It's always integrated. Guddu knows this, and we need to learn from Guddu. Now, this can also be thought of quite theoretically. Now, we have all studied, and even from our childhood, we were all taught that humans can have 5 sensory systems. We have, we can see things, we can hear things, we can smell things, we can touch things, and we can taste things. 5 of them at the most. Not everybody has them, So some people may not have sight, some people may not have sound, some people may not have touch, some people may not be able to smell, some people may not be able to taste. And we also all use these systems separately. So the way I see things, the way you will see things are different. The way that you will feel sensations and the way I will feel sensations are different. So we know that all of these things are differentiated. But at the same time, this is the maximum of what can happen within a human being. Notice again, we're restricting ourselves to humans here. And again, I need to highlight that all living things have their own sensory systems, right? We know, for example, the bats can use sonar. Dolphins can use sonar. We can't. So the sensory systems that we have available to us change the way that we know the world and engage with the world. So people who cannot see can still use sound, right? People who cannot use sight or sound, they can use braille, which is touch. But for each of them and each of us, our world and our understanding of the world alters based on how we engage with our sensory systems. Now, even though we have all been taught these are 5 senses, what we have never been taught that there is actually a grouping within them. And there is a sequencing. So what you see here is a sequencing. Sight, sound, smell, touch, taste. In that sequence, in that order, don't ever confuse it. And sight and sound are group A, and smell, touch, and taste are group B. Now, let me tell you why we need to do this. Because notice right now, you can hear me and you can see me. But you cannot see what I can see. And I cannot see what you can see. You can hear me, but I cannot hear what you can hear. And you can't hear what all the things I can hear. So for example, I can hear the sound of the birds. Every once in a while, I hear an airplane. I hear all of those things which are in my presence, but they are not things you can hear. Why? Because sight and sound can be displaced. They can either be in your presence or they can be displaced, not in your presence. Right? So for example, our session right now, sight and sound is displaced. We are not sharing the present. And for those of people who will watch a recording of this session, they will watch a recording of the session. Nothing is placed there. It's a displacement. And if I were to take notes or you were to take notes on what I was saying, and you shared the notes with somebody, those are notes. The only time these things can actually happen are in presence, but sight and sound can be displaced. Notice that group B, this can never happen. You cannot smell, touch, or taste things that are not present. So I saw some of the participants earlier, they were eating something. Now, I don't know the smell of it. I can't touch that thing. I can't taste it, but they did. And now they're not eating it, which means it's gone. They only have a memory of it. They have a memory of what it touched, felt like. Was it warm? Was it cold? Was it hard? Was it soft? Was it crispy, crunchy? They have a memory of it. They can describe it, but the taste is gone. The touch is gone. The smell is gone. That can only happen in the presence. So I had a glass of water, I drank it. Now I don't have a glass of water. It's gone. I can't taste the water anymore. Mary is drinking some water. So Mary can taste it. She can feel it. She can have the perception of the water filling her mouth. Nice, cool, refreshing. I cannot. And it can only happen in her presence. It cannot be displaced ever. Now observe something here. All of the modern education happens only through group A. Not through group B, which is weird. Why is it weird? Because think about how a human child grows up or develops. You've probably all seen children, babies, they put everything in their mouth. Why? Because taste, touch, and smell are the fundamental blocks of learning. That's how we learn to live engaged with the world. First through taste, then touch and smell. Group B is what we use to learn about the world first. Then we learn how to understand sounds. And how we understand sound can impact how we see things. So I can show you something like this is pink, but some people might think it's red. Some people might have another term for it, rose or something, because it's the same thing, but it can have different terms. And the way that we name it will change our perception of how we see things and how we separate things out. We create categories through it. So for example, when we look at a tree, we can say a tree has a trunk, a tree has branches, a tree has twigs, a tree has roots, a tree has leaves. But notice that is our categorization of what a tree has. A tree doesn't have any of those things. A tree just exists. We give it the categories. It comes through the human language systems. The tree itself doesn't have any of it. We create those systems. We create the terms of phonemes and morphemes and syntax. It doesn't exist. Speech just is. And we change speech. It's dynamic. We change it all the time. If I were to give this lecture again, my speech will be different. Because it's a performance in real time. But when you have a recording of it, then it's not. Now, things in our presence, we can still be fooled. We can still be tricked. That's why magic can exist, right? Magicians exist. They can trick us for our perceptions. So we can be tricked in our presence. It's possible. But imagine this. If we are engaging with material that is displaced, that is not in our presence. So whether it's a recording, it's a media, it's a book, whatever it might be. And if the person who wrote that or created it deliberately lied to us in order to manipulate us, then guess what? We're doomed. We're gone. We're destroyed. We're destroyed because they lied to us. They manipulated us. And you will notice a lot of things that we learn in our books and education, they're actually incorrect. We believe in them because we have to take exams. Remember, going back to that point, the first one, it's the tests. We have to pass the tests, and we have to learn through books. We have to learn from books, and we have to pass tests. And that's because that's through that we create a belief system. But if we look at the data itself, we will realize it's a lie. They're wrong. They're created in order to trick us. I'll give you an example. We all learn that there is a past tense, there is a present tense, there's a future tense. And we learned that not just in English, we learn it in all languages. My own language, Boli, I was taught this too. So, and we have to take exams. And of course, I passed all those exams, otherwise I wouldn't be where I am. So we create all these belief systems around it. But if you take a step back and you look at, for example, just first to English, you realize that English doesn't have a future tense. There is no future tense in English. There is a past tense. How do we know that? Because I can say, I walk, I walked. So there's a slight sound change, and the sound change marks a change in the tense. I talk, I talked. I eat, I ate. I fly, I flew. Notice it's a sound change. That's marked tense. But if I have to say anything that refers to a future point in time, I have to use modality. I have to use modals. I will fly, I will eat, I might talk, I shall talk. This is all modality. So English doesn't have a future tense. It doesn't exist. And yet we all have to learn it. We all have to believe in it. We all have to teach it with absolutely no awareness of what has actually happened. We have just been tricked. Why do they create a future tense? Because they want to create an illusion of a future. Why? Because the English grammars were written by capitalists, right? The colonials were capitalists. They wanted to create a future that's imagined to be concrete so we can buy things for the future. We can buy tickets, we can buy vacations, we can buy this in the future, that in the future. And just imagine what just happened with COVID. All our plans collapsed because there is no future tense. It just doesn't exist. Not even in English. Now, if you look at my Boli, my speech, guess what? There is not even a past tense. It doesn't exist. There's only present. There's only present tense. If I have to say, I say, tha, main pani pi raha hu, main pani pi raha tha, main pani piyunga. I have to change everything. I can refer to a past time and I can refer to a future time, yes, but these are not tense. These are reference to a time, which is not tense. But notice we are all taught all of this. And because we are taught these things which are actually incorrect, we get tricked. But if we live in our present, if we are based in our presence, and we can observe things, we will not be tricked. This is why the colonial education always displaces us. It creates a displacement and then uses a displacement to educate us. Indigenous education would never do that. If there is no performance, there is no education. You will not send your child to somebody who cannot perform to learn. You wouldn't. You need a performer. But now we send them off to schools where teachers are non-performers. They're teaching from books that are often not true, that were written by people who are willing to manipulate us. They manipulate us through it. And this has been happening for 500 years, 600 years. Where did the Europeans learn this trick? It's very interesting. They learned it by creating the Reformation within the Christian church. The Protestant movement, Martin Luther, goes back into the 1500s, late 1400s. He was living at the same time as the Europeans made their own printing presses. And when he was alive, he was the author of something like 90% of everything that was published in the German language. 90% of everything that was published in the German language was written by Martin Luther when he was alive. And through that, they realized the power of the written word and how it can manipulate and influence people. And once they did that within their own communities, they took it and they spread it everywhere. And through literacy and through displacements, they trick people and they fool people. And they create colonization, they create globalization, they create fake development. And because we are colonized in our minds and in the ways that we function, we adopt all of it without questioning anything, and the result is devastating. I'll give you an example. This is a picture I took in Pakistan a couple of years ago. Look at all the trash. This is in front of a mosque. This is in front of a mosque. The prophets knew that corruption will set in. Greed will find ways and humanity lose. So through their lives, they demonstrated how heaven is earth when integrity performed. When integrity performed. And now paradise is lost. Chaos descended. Filth mounds around places of worship. How long will people suffer before they realize salvation is in performance, not in beliefs? That's just sociosemiotic. Performance, behavior, action. Have people forgotten the promised paradise that brings smiles back to the masses? Those simple acts of honesty, love, inclusion that brings paradise back to earth. Now, while we are doing all of this stuff, guess what the world we live in? Everybody talks about human rights. There are United Nations and human rights charters and human rights charters and human rights this. What is human rights? Anything that is restricted to humans is anthropocentric. It's human-centric. Our own concept of hukuk al-ibad is not human-centric. It engages and relates to every creature and living or non. So there is no human rights. It doesn't exist. It's a trick to make us think about humans only and forget about the rest, other creatures. And that is a problem that leads us to kind of world we live in, full of trash, where we can say one thing and do another, when we can believe in one thing and practice something else. So I don't believe in human rights and I don't advocate for them. Instead, I talk about 3 biological rights. Just 3 of them, so easy. Born of this earth, I share rights with my brothers and sisters who crawl, swim, fly, stand, or whatever. Number 1, right to live on earth. Right to live on earth. Without paying rent, without being killed, without being thrown off. 2, right to nourishment, whatever it might be. And 3, right to receive your integrity. Receive your integrity. These fulfilled, Mother Earth will keep me strong. Notice there's 3 of them. And we don't get any of them in this world. We have to pay rent to live. We kill other life forms. We remove them from land. We have no right to nourishment. We have to get food from supermarkets. We don't know how, and we receive nobody's integrity. Nobody gives us integrity. Hardly anybody. If you're lucky, you might have a few people around you. But our governments don't do it. Our knowledge makers don't do it. The people who write books for us that we learn and teach through, they don't do it. And when they have a lack of integrity, everything collapses. And notice, when you have integrity, you can have any kind of nourishment. You're allowed to hunt. Hunting is okay because hunting requires integrity. It's not easy to hunt. If you ever tried to hunt an animal, you will realize it's very difficult. It's not an easy task. But creating farming, creating chicken farms and poultry farms, that is not have no integrity. That has no integrity because we are farming a live thing. We really have to rethink all of these things. We always think about haram and halal. What is halal to eat and what is haram? Chicken is haram because it is maltreated, it receives no integrity. It doesn't matter what animal it is. It is the ethics. It is the ethics of the sourcing of your food. It's the ethics of the sourcing of your knowledge. That is what halal is. Not this product or that product. That's symbols. That's use of symbols to trick us. So we have to go back to practice and rethink it. Just 3 rights. If we can maintain these 3 rights, our world will improve. All of us, for everything, for all the creatures, everything. But if these rights are kept away from us and instead we are being tricked through human rights, then nothing's going to happen. No change. We need to rethink all of this. I wrote a poem a few years ago called The Diamond Jug. It's a short poem, very short poem in 4 parts. And I've given you the link here on the bottom. I'll actually send the link via chat later on. But I'll read you the epilogue, which I actually wrote. I think it's the first part of the poem. Papa, Kudus walked up and asked one day. Yes, Kudus, I replied. Papa, I read your poem, The Diamond Jug. I don't get it, Kudus added. Oh, yes, I understand. That poem has too many metaphors. Metaphors are when you say one thing, but mean another. They can be a horror. Metaphors may mean many things. Come here. I called him closer. Let me share one meaning of the poem, and then you can find out others. Yes, said Kudus, coming closer, encouraging me to keep going. So, our ancestors didn't live in countries, nor did they work for others for money. They did not own land nor lives. They lived free, a life in harmony. People were honest and respectful, and every life was precious. Nothing was wasted, everything shared. The diamond jug made everything delicious. So what happened, Papa? Think of a diamond jug as magic, and our ancestors made it happen. It was easy when people used logic and believed in actions, not chatting. The lands where our ancestors lived were invaded and looted. The invaders replaced the magic with grief, greed, and guns. How, Papa? Kudus gasped. Lies, theft, weapons, poverty, hunger, violence, anger, revenge, money, power divided the people, turning friends into enemies. This is the world we live in today, where schools turn us into slaves. People learn to trust paper and screens more than their own senses and deeds. Papa, is the diamond jug lost forever? Guddu wondered, lost in thought. Of course not, you see. The diamond jug is always here. If we can't feel it, it is us who are lost. Once we recover, the jug will return. Once we people learn our lesson, take action and end oppression, things will heal and recover, because divisions make diamonds disappear. Divisions make diamonds disappear. Divisions make diamonds disappear, sang Guddu as he hopped away, turned a corner, and disappeared. So let me end this talk. I mean, you can see there's a message of hope already. And let me end this talk with a little last point. Let us find hope in this metaphor. Us humans together are a tree. And a tree, although fallen, can regenerate and stand tall again. So with that, I'll end the session, and I'm happy to take questions as you like. Thank you.
Oh, great. Thank you, Ahmar. So I'm mesmerized with your writing and your poem, because it's so heart-touching and also thought-provoking, because there are so many things that can be discussed actually within your writing. Is it your personal website in We Mount?
No, We Mountains is not my website. I will actually send you the link. I did say I will. We Mountains is actually published by a group of indigenous people from the northern mountains of Pakistan. So it's a group of multiple groups of indigenous groups. And so they came together and they published this thing called We Mountains. It's a magazine. It's an online magazine. And I write for them. Let me find you the diamond jug. I do a lot of writing for them. In fact, recently I only write for them.
All right. So you wrote regularly there. You write regularly there, are you?
Yeah, I do. So this is the link to the whole poem, the diamond jug.
Okay, We Mountains. All right. So thank you so much for explaining to us about the relation between language learning and also symbols that occur surround us in our everyday life. It's about the human interference, socio-semiotic versus material biological world that can be separated, and we can also categorize which one linguistic as well as the religious system or the religion or spirituality itself contained in a socio-semiotic world. And also it's all about the performance or actions in religion that will influence the way we're thinking. And I do agree with you that the indigenous education, they provide more contextualized education and also more well established knowledge for the learners, comparing with the colonization system of education itself. So I think the question and answer session or the discussion session will be held after the session or after the presentation from Mary. Is it okay, Ahmar?
Perfect.
Or Prof Nomad, or I call you Prof Nomad, or you have a
Sunny Boy. I go by Sunny Boy. Sunny Boy. Sunny Boy is the name that my indigenous mom gave me on adopting me into the Australian Aboriginal family. And Brumby is something I chose. Brumby, if you know what Brumby are the wild horses in Australia. So a wild horse in Australia is called a Brumby. So when I came to Australia, I came here as a workhorse, but then I ran away and I lived with the indigenous people. So I'm a Brumby.
All right. So what does it mean, Sunny Boy? Like in indigenous language.
Sunny Boy.
Originally, not in.
Just Sunny Boy. Just Sunny Boy.
Sunny Boy. Okay, great. Thank you so much, Prof Nomad, for your explanation. And I will open the question and answer session after the second presentation from Mary. So now I would like to introduce you to our second invited speaker. She is Dr. Mary. I would like to read the curriculum vitae of Dr. Mary before I let her start her explanation about, about spirituality and ELT. So, hello, Mary, are you here?
Yes, hi.
Hi, all right. So, Mary Shepard Wong, Ph.D. She got her Bachelor of Art in Psychology back in 1980, and then she got her Master of Art in East Asian Languages and Cultures in 1985, and she graduated from Master of Art in TESOL in 1990, and she got her PhD from University of Southern California in international education back in 2000 with the dissertation title of The Influence of Gender and Culture on the Pedagogy of 5 Western English Teachers in China. So actually, Mary has so many professional experiences. One of them is as the interim associate dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences for graduate programs and research in Azusa Pacific University. And she is also from 2000 to present to now become a director of Master of Arts or TESOL field-based program in Azusa Pacific University. And she is also the Director of Global Studies, Sociology and TESOL Department in Azusa University. And she has so many publications, like more than 5 books, and then more than 18 book chapters, and more than 150 presentations. So she got so many grants, awards, and also fellowship. And I think the most recent grants that you got is to become a visiting professor, a visiting scholar in Vietnam. Is it right? Like
Yeah.
2 weeks ago?
Yeah, they call it an English language specialist supported by the U.S. Department of State. Yes.
Yeah. It's a Fulbright program. Yeah, things. Yeah, and then she has some professional services. One of them are become the elected member of the TESOL International Nominating Committee for the year of 2020 and 2021. And also, without further ado, I'd like to please welcome Mary Shepard Wong, PhD, to deliver her presentation about spirituality in English language teaching. It will be very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. So, are you seeing my screen?
Yeah. It's crystal clear.
Okay, so let me make sure I can get to the place. So I can. All right. So you're seeing this now, right? We're
Yeah,
good?
it's full screen. Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm going to get rid of so I don't see myself. Okay. All right. So, yeah, I just want to thank you for the invitation to be here. Welcome to my presentation. It's called Exploring the Dangers and the Delights of Teacher Spiritual Identity as Pedagogy. And yeah, I look forward to hearing what you're going to think of this presentation. So let me see if I can make this go forward. There we go. Okay. I think I'm going to get rid of something so I can see better. Good. All right. So you can see the 3 books on the bottom of this screen here. And those are 3 books that I was the lead editor on. And they all had to do with basically religion and English language teaching. The first one I co-edited with Suresh Kanagaraja. It was published in 2009, and it's called Christian and Critical English Language Educators in Dialogue. The next one I co-edited with Carolyn Christensen, an amazing man called Zoltan Dornier, who passed away this year, a real loss. And that one was called Christian Faith and English Language Teaching. I had a lot of people who wanted to be in that book, but the book was supposed to focus on on empirical research around kind of Christians who were engaging in English language teaching. So I said, okay, I promise I'll do a book for you. Just hang in there. And so then the other book on spirituality and English language teaching came out. And I said, Ahmar, can you do this book with me? And he agreed. And so we co-edited that book, and we brought together people who were, Muslim and Christian and Hindu and Buddhist and non-religious, and just talking about spirituality, English language teaching. So anyway, you see here the 3 books that I will refer to a little bit throughout this. So I'm going to start with my spiritual identity statement. And that's something I asked every single one of the 30 contributors to that first book to write. And some of the authors were rather well known, but they said this was the hardest thing they ever had to do. So I'll just start with mine. And it's that I believe that one cannot teach people language without touching the spiritual, as humans are spiritual beings, and the ability to create languages is a marvelous gift of God to be explored, enjoyed, and valued. Although I believe God is truth, I realize my perception of truth is tainted by my human condition and sin. So I'm open to learning how my understanding of God is incomplete or incorrect. Sorry. Whoops. Thank you. Sorry about that. Hang on. Let me read the last part. I acknowledge and am deeply saddened by the way institutional religion has used its power to oppress those who God has created and for whom Christ died. I claim both titles. I'm a Christian, but I'm also critical, and I'm a critical English language educator, and find it hard to be the former without the latter. So there you have it. All right. Oh, good. I found a better way to progress my slides. All right. So spirituality, I believe, like language, it has the potential to connect us and to move us beyond ourselves. This is my outline for today. I'm going to talk about the importance of context, the difference between morals and ethics. I'm going to look at 7 different sources of ethical principles and moral beliefs, and then 3 dangers and 3 delights of spiritual identity and teaching. I'm going to go over some questions to consider. And then I have some final thoughts of how our spirituality can motivate our students, guide our teaching, sustain our practice, enlarge our paradigms, and inspire scholarship. And I want to say that most of this is taken from chapter 2 in the book that Ahmar and I co-edited. So you can see that, but there is some other stuff in here as well. So the first one I talk about is the neglected domain in identity research. So research in second language education, it's examined many different types of teacher identities, right? You've got nativeness and non-nativeness. You're looking at gender identity, sexuality. There's studies on race and indigenous identities, transculture, transnational identities. And all of this scholarship, I believe, is very important because teacher identity can be a valuable pedagogical resource. As Brian Morgan tells us, he says, though, Brian Morgan notes that there's a blind spot, kind of a neglected domain, they call it, in teaching identity research. And he said that is spirituality. And Morgan and Clark, they say that the most significant development in language teacher identity research is a turn towards values and morals and ethics in the work of teachers. So if that's true, it really seems appropriate then to explore teachers' spiritual identities. And I'd like to keep in mind Foucault's caution that everything is dangerous, right? And I also want to be very aware of the historical alignment of missionary work, as Ahmar just told us, and English language teaching and colonialism. So concerns regarding, teachers drawing from their faith to inform their pedagogy, those concerns are justified when you think of that everything could be dangerous and the history of alignment of missionary schools and even language, right? But this talk describes the potential dangers like that, but also potential delights as well. So we're going to talk about in this talk, I want to talk about maybe criteria to use in applying in deliberating, maybe what is ethical, when is it okay to bring faith into the classroom, and how do I do it? And how can I make sure that my teacher, my spiritual identity, right, is a positive motivating factor that can help students and help myself. So I'm going to look at faith in the classroom. So some people might consider this to be irrelevant, meaning it doesn't matter. It's insensitive, like how dare you bring faith in the classroom? Or some people might think it's innocuous, meaning, well, what harm does it do? So I teach a course called Critical Perspectives of Christianity and English Language Teaching as an elective in our M.A.T.S.L program, and it's at my Christian university. And the course has dozens of readings by evangelicals and atheists and many others from many different faith traditions about the dilemmas and the tensions and opportunities created around the intersection of religious faith, pedagogy, and scholarship. And I used the book, Wong and Kanagaraja in 2009. And the majority of my students in the course, they would self-identify as Christians, I would say, but there are also students in the course who are atheists, who are agnostics, who are Buddhists, Muslims, spiritualists, or non-religious, right? And at the end of this course, students are always asked to talk about which of the beliefs that you had, about your faith and English language teaching, which of the beliefs that you had when you started this course, which were challenged, which ones were changed, right? And which ones, confirmed, stayed the same after engaging in this. And I really like to hear what they say after that. And at the beginning of the course, many students consider the topic of faith as kind of irrelevant, meaning what does faith have to do with English language teaching? We used to have a Christian caucus in TESOL, and I would sit at the booth and people would walk like, why, what are you talking about? What does Christianity or any religious faith have to do with English language teaching, right? So that's what some people felt. And some other people thought maybe they were non-religious and they thought it was very insensitive. Like, why would you bring faith into the classroom? It doesn't belong there, right? And others, maybe who were very strong in religious faith, wouldn't see anything wrong with it. Like, well, why not? It's innocuous, right? But I want to say that, and so they would say, what harm is it, right? But after the course, most of the students no longer regarded that teachers' spiritual identities were totally irrelevant or insensitive or innocuous to teaching. And many of the more religious students conceded that what they thought was really innocent or harmless, it needs to be more critically examined. While maybe non-religious students, they could now see that, if integrated appropriately, faith could strengthen one's professional practice and one's pedagogy. So I should say that I understand that not all students consider faith to be salient to their pedagogical practice. Students in the course are at least exposed to others who view their religious faith as essential to their work and to their lives. And most of the students came to understand this perspective that teacher's spiritual identity can provide a sense of calling and purpose and guidance and support and motivation to do one's job with excellence and to connect who one is to what one does and how to teach with integrity. But as I said, there are dangers to consider related to ethical concerns of the role of a teacher's faith in the classroom. So after a brief discussion of the importance of context, and we'll talk about that, I want to consider a difference between morals and ethics. So I'll explain what I mean by that. And then we'll look at 7 different sources of ethical principles and moral beliefs. And then I'll talk about the 3 dangers and 3 delights that can emerge when teachers' spiritual identities inform their pedagogy. Okay, so the importance of context. So context is so important, isn't it? When determining the limitations and freedoms of a teacher's expression of faith in the classroom, right? Like consider a teacher at a Christian university in the US. I'm expected to, and I'm even evaluated on my faith integration. We use the term faith integration. That means, in my context, it means how well a teacher integrates their faith into their classroom. It's not just a prayer at the beginning. That's not just a sandwich, a prayer at the beginning, a prayer at the end, but it's really thinking through, how does your faith inform how you interact with your students, what you choose to have them read, how you grade, all of those things, right? So anyway, that's faith integration. But contrast this with maybe a foreign teacher who's teaching at an elementary school, maybe in China, and they're expected never to talk about religion in the classroom. So you can see in these 2 different contexts how context is so important, where you are and the expectations. I believe you are a faith-based institution, right? Islamic University. We started with that beautiful prayer. So my institution is also faith-based. So that gives us a lot more space to be able to do this. So anyway, there are several contextual factors to consider when discussing issues of faith and teaching. You need to think of the nation state, what nation, what country are you in? You have to think of the community, the institution, as we just mentioned, public, private, is it religious or is it secular? You need to consider the course content and also relevant current events. You need to think of, the potential consequences of students discussing their faith in some contexts that might not be wise, right? You need to think of the relationship of the teacher and the student and several student variables as well, like if they're very young or their proficiency level or their religious background. That's just a few. So the variables are many, and contextualizing all discussions of faith in the classroom is important, as context plays a really large role in determining what would be appropriate and inappropriate in terms of, faith integration. So now I'm going to talk about morals and ethics. And, I did some reading in this area, and people use these words interchangeably, or they define them differently. So I'm just saying, for this presentation, this is how I'm defining it. And I understand that these are defined and looked at many different ways by different people. So, but in addition to context, another important factor is the discussion of faith and teaching is the distinction between ethics and morals. So obviously, both ethics and morals, they deal with what is considered to be right or wrong, right? But for the purposes of this talk, I'm going to make a distinction in terms of our perspective. So in this talk, I'm saying ethics is concerned more with external, kind of a set of rules, ethical standards, like an ethical code of conduct, maybe that doctors have, or sociologists, or even educators, right? And it could vary between contexts. And when I think of morals, I think of maybe your internal moral compass, right? It's more internal to the individual, what is consistent with your own beliefs. So while most actions tend to be considered either both ethical and moral, you could have unethical or immoral, right? With this distinction, it would be possible for an action to be considered ethical and immoral, or unethical but moral, okay? So when you think of attorneys and doctors and psychologists and teachers, we're all required to follow an ethical code of conduct, regardless of if it supports or conflicts with our personal beliefs or our morals. But ignoring or violating stated ethical codes of conduct, like if you violate an ethical code of conduct at your school, what could happen? You could get fired, right? But if you violate your own moral internal compass, it could create a lot of stress in your life. So, they're both, it's important to understand the distinctions and the consequences. So I'm talking here about seeing the line, because you say, you're not supposed to cross the line. So how do you see the line? How do you know, oh, you shouldn't have said that in the classroom, or it's all right to say this in the classroom, whether you're, and again, thinking about, wait, is this a faith-based institution or is it secular? And, with all those things in mind, when resolving these ethical dilemmas, these are some of the things that will help you see that line, okay? And it can help us, maybe think about more deeply, is this appropriate or not appropriate? So I have a list of books on the bottom of this slide that also talk about ethics within the field of English language teaching. So I just list those there. If you're interested, you can look at those later. So what I'm going to show you now is these 7 sources. So I'll just go over them briefly here, and then we'll go over them one by one. But these are sources to help us determine what's ethical and moral, right? So number 1 is sacred text. So obviously, to Muslims, it would be the Quran. To Christians, it would be the Bible. I guess to Buddhists, it would be the sacred Buddhist texts. So there's sacred texts. So we go there for a source of ethical and, what should I do, right? We start there. But another source is reason. So we apply reason to that. And another source could be our cultural traditions. What does our culture tell us is we should do in this situation? We also have personal, right, experiences. We draw from our personal experiences quite a lot to determine what's right or what's wrong. We also have institutional mission statements, right? Is the mission of the institution to try to help us understand our place in this world and our religious leader, more. And then we have professional guidelines, and we also have IRB ethical research board. So I'm just quickly going to go through these and give you examples. So like sacred or seminal texts from your religious or faith tradition, or even your worldview. Like you could say, maybe someone says, but wait, I'm not religious, so what do I use? Well, maybe you would find something you read that really inspired you. So sacred and seminal texts are sources of moral principles that inform our our decisions, right? For people of faith, right? This is very important, and it overlaps with all these other ones. So those are that. And then reason, right? Reason plays a really important role in determining what one considers to be ethical or moral. And when taken together with sacred texts, reason can temper potentially inappropriate responses. For example, in the Bible, it might say, if your right eye offends thee, pluck it out. But, we don't walk around with just one eye. Most of us have 2 eyes. So we're not plucking out our eyes. So obviously we apply reason in understanding that verse and saying, this was just kind of a metaphor. It was to show us how important this is, right? So the application of reason helps to prevent that from happening. And for some people, reason might be considered the primary source for ethical moral decisions, while for others, it should be applied in concert with other sources. So another source is, cultural tradition. And some people might have like faith traditions. Ahmar talked about Protestants, right? So there's Lutherans and all these different kinds. So those traditions might also influence what you would do. It was interesting when, I don't know if you're allowed to like hit students or spank students in schools where you are, but we're not allowed to do that in the United States anymore. But before we were, and before they used to say, oh, the Bible says that we should spank our children, so we should do it. But it's interesting because now they say, no, the Bible tells us we shouldn't spank our children. It's like, what? Wait, but they're drawing from principles in scripture to kind of support either view. So I guess what I'm saying is we need to be aware and be humble in our assertions and about what we think our sacred text is saying, because over time, at least in Christian, our views have changed of what that says. So anyway, another thing to think about is experience. And this is one of the most powerful sources to determine what's ethical or moral. Like, think of applying mercy to students, right? If you maybe were given mercy as a student and it really changed your life, you might really want to show mercy to someone else. But another teacher might withhold mercy because they think, well, wait a minute, we need to be fair, right? So this illustrates that in some cases, a choice is not just right or wrong, but which ethical principle you're emphasizing. Is it justice and fairness, or is it beneficence, right? And trying to do good to that student. So just thinking about how experience might influence you. And then obviously there's the institutional mission, right, that we talked about before. And our obligation as teachers to support the mission statement and to not work against it. And, you know, when you think about academic freedom, you know, it's essential. Academic freedom is essential for learning and research. And there should be no taboo on questions or areas of inquiry so that learning can flourish. But academic freedoms of individuals are constrained by academic contexts in which they work. For example, if you're working to support your institutional mission, right, and you might have to consider what you couldn't do or couldn't study. So anyway, just thinking of institutional missions. Another important area to look at is professional guidelines and codes of conduct. I'm not going to go over them here, but if you refer to the chapter, I have links to several different really good codes of conduct that can be very helpful in helping you determine what you should do. And finally, I'm going to talk about the ethical precautions applied in research. Often we call this the IRB, or the Institutional Research Board, that either approves or disapproves of research we want to do, and talking about human subjects. And this usually has to do with 3 different aspects from the Belmont report. And these principles are respect for persons, it's beneficence, or to do no harm, and then it's justice, meaning, you know, fairness, treating everybody fairly. So I know these apply to research, but the principles are often used, they can be useful in teaching and scholarship as well. So I know I've gone kind of fast, but with this background of the importance of context, right? Where is the university and where is the school and all those different variables, and also, you know, thinking about the distinctions between morals and ethics, and then all these different potential sources that could inform our understanding of morals and ethics, we now turn to those 3 dangers and 3 delights of our spiritual identity as pedagogy. So here we have the 3 dangers. So as I said before, Foucault has said that everything is dangerous, right? So my question is, in what ways is teachers' spiritual identity as pedagogy potentially dangerous? And I think there are many examples in history of the ways that religious fundamentalism and fanaticism can lead to the dismantling of institutions and of higher education, and the disruption, you know, for the quest for truth, and extreme violence and even genocide. So religious views, you know, they have been the cause of many of the world's worst man-made atrocities, like the Crusades and the Inquisition. Even recent history has religious-based or fueled atrocities, such as the armed conflict in Northern Ireland, political instability in South Africa, and systemic oppression and forced relocation in many, many regions of the world. So we can't deny the devastating consequences of religious fanaticism on a global scale, and how it has destroyed higher education where it once flourished, or even stifled, you know, the exploration of truth. However, moving on, but that should not mean that we ban or prevent religious discussions in the classroom. I know Ahmar said he doesn't believe in human rights, but I guess I do. I think this is a basic human right, and that's the freedom to believe as one wants to and to choose your own faith. So educating students about religion and then creating a better understanding of the religious other and our spiritual connectedness, it may serve to mitigate religious misunderstandings and minimize religiously fueled conflicts, right? So, but the question remains, how does one allow your faith to inform your pedagogy without imposing it on students and limiting their free exploration of ideas? So exposing them, but not imposing your own views, right? So put another way, what are the dangers of spiritual identity as pedagogy, and how can one avoid them while engaging in English language teaching and teacher education? And, you know, there are many dangers you might consider, and this list is not exhaustive, but it addresses 3 that affect English language teaching or teachers who seek to engage in teacher spiritual identity as pedagogy. And I call these the threat of the native speaker quasi-teacher, the menace of the overzealous oblivious teacher, and the peril of the pariah faith-informed teachers. So let's go to the first one. Ahmar will agree with this one. So this is the threat of the native speaker quasi-teacher. So yeah, some Christian religious agencies are motivated to place people in countries that might not be open to missionaries, right? So they recruit and they send people who may not have teaching experience. And Christian mission agencies have been criticized for this, and I have criticized for this and even published about this. But they are not the only group who does this, but they are one group who does. So some Christian mission agencies even go so far as to advertise that no training is needed, right? You, as long as you are a quote unquote native speaker, and then I cite Mahboob's here work, as well as an article I did with Stratton. You know, this is unethical. It's just unethical because students' learning could be hindered due to the inexperience and lack of skills, knowledge, and awareness of this so-called teacher. That's why I call them a quasi-teacher. In the book called Teaching Ethically, this book focuses on ethical standards for teaching psychologists, right? And it discusses APA standards. One is called the boundaries of competence, and the other one is called accuracy in teaching. And both of these principles would be violated by this practice, just to send people because they're native speakers, but as Ahmar said, they don't perform. They can't even speak another language. So you're asking them to teach someone how to speak another language, but they've never learned how to speak another language themselves. They've just read it in books, right? So I call this the quasi-teacher. They're sent abroad. And, you know, at first students might be excited, like they go to China and it's like, oh, the Chinese students are excited, this foreign teacher. But then when they realize the teacher can't teach, that excitement wanes and it's really a disservice to the students. So that's a danger. If you're teaching to spread your religion and you don't have the qualifications or the training. Yeah, that's real bad. Another one is the menace of the overzealous, oblivious teacher. And what I mean by these is that actions of overzealous teachers are unethical when student learning is diminished because of misuse of time. Like maybe the teacher always talks about their own agenda or their own all their own beliefs, but maybe that's not what the course is about. And maybe they don't support the learning outcomes of the course. So that can be problematic because other required content is omitted due to discussions of these issues, right? And these issues aren't part of the curriculum. So this, of course, could be related to, you know, many different teacher agendas, not just faith agendas. You know, a teacher could have any agenda that they always want to talk about in class, but if you're talking about that and not focusing on the content, that could be unethical. And also it could hurt students' learning or motivation, right? Because the students' actions, if the teacher is unaware of this and students are like, oh, here they go again, right? It could lead to another danger, and I call that the oblivious teacher. So oblivious teacher is like, they're unaware of how the student-teacher power differential may really affect students' reluctance to voice dissatisfaction or potential coercion in the classroom. Like, students aren't going to say, ugh, you talk too much about this. They just won't, right? Because there's this power differential. So we all know that motivation is really powerful in language learning, and teachers need to be aware of ways that they might be demotivating their students, maybe when they're imposing their own beliefs on them, or they're disparaging their students' religious beliefs in some ways, right? And looking at the opposite end of this, there's something called the null curriculum, null meaning like zero, nothing, nada. And that's creating a spiritual void. And that's kind of like where you avoid or you deny or you denigrate any spiritual aspects or religious practices or discussions, even if they're embedded in everyday life. Like, what did you do over the weekend? And if they start saying, well, I went to temple, or I went to church, or I went to the mosque. Oh, we don't talk about that in class. It's like, what? Right? So that's the null curriculum, where they're not allowed to discuss that at all in classes. That could be the other extreme, where, you're supposed to leave your spirituality at the door and not bring it into the classroom. So teachers' comments and actions may make students feel that they're not permitted to explore their views on religion or faith beliefs, or that those beliefs are unworthy of academic discussions. So another danger, and I wasn't aware of this one so much, but when I asked teachers about it, it came up in conversations, and it's called the peril of the pariah faith-informed teacher. And this could be like a Muslim teacher or a Christian teacher who is afraid to talk about their faith because everybody will think they're crazy, right? So they're like the pariah. So I call it the pariah because they feel misunderstood or pigeonholed or essentialized or ostracized, alienated, silenced. They feel they could be fired or branded as crazy or a proselytizer just for being a person of faith. So Morgan and Clark note that, voice proscriptions against religious identity work in second language education, he calls this is hypocritical, and it's given the field, the field is usually preoccupied with engaged identity pedagogies, right? So why can't we talk about spiritual identities? So teachers seeking to allow their spirituality to inform their pedagogy might be dangerous because of the perception of being insensitive to students, even if they're not insensitive, right? Or they might be afraid of the disdain and the reprisals that students or even colleagues or administrators will give them for raising issues of faith, right? So some teachers, especially in secular settings, felt trapped and constrained by the curriculum and teaching context. And they asked, how can they allow their faith to inform their pedagogies in ways that were professional and also sensitive, and did not leave them as like pariahs, that crazy religious person, right? And so I think that research that investigates these perceptions and questions would be helpful to respond to this. So we're going to move from these 3 dangers to 3 delights, okay? Because there's also some good news. So while the dangers are real, there are also delights in faith-informed teaching and practice. And I've spaced here to only highlight 3. So I'm going to talk about the gratification of teaching with integrity, the joy of meaningful service, and the satisfaction of critical engagement, right? And the first describes introspection, like going inward and just being gratified and knowing that who I am as a teacher, I can express that. So and then the second goes outward, like joy of giving and oneself to others. And then the last one applies kind of a critical, purposeful, intentional mindful approach in the way that this is accomplished. So looking at these one by one. So the gratification of teaching with integrity. So there's an author called Parker Palmer, and he's written a book that is just sold millions. You know, like there's the 10th anniversary of his book, and it's called The Courage to Teach. And, you know, I think he's a Quaker, but he doesn't really talk about God, or he doesn't ever talk about the Bible or anything, but he just is a very spiritual person. And he says that good teaching cannot be reduced to technique, but that good teaching comes from the identity and integrity of the teacher. And then you have a brand who also discusses the importance of, you know, teachers connecting. He calls it the personal and the professional. And he's not particularly talking from a spiritual or religious perspective, but he does say that teachers should ask themselves, how does language teaching fit into my vision of who I am becoming and how I would like the world to be? Sid Brown is a Buddhist. And I read her book, A Buddhist in the Classroom, and it just changed how I thought about my faith. I recommend this book just because it will change the way that you think, wow, how can my religious faith impact, you know, what I do? So Sid Brown, on her sabbatical, she reflected on Buddhist teaching. And she focuses on this question, this gratification of teaching who we are, and that it's not limited to just people of faith, although it does touch on the spiritual. And some non-religious students even have told me that they've enjoyed taking courses at a faith-based university because it's given them this opportunity to really consider their values and their world beliefs, their worldview and their beliefs, and help them to connect their teaching, right, and their spiritual journey, and to rekindle their passion for teaching. And they noticed this spiritual focus really helped them do that. One time in one class, I had a Christian and I had a Buddhist and I had a Muslim, and those are my only 3 students in the teaching practicum class. And I said, you have to do faith integration, but don't do my faith. I'm going to show you how I do it with my Christian faith, but I want you to show me how whatever you believe in your faith, how that informs your teaching, who you are in the classroom, how you respond to students, what materials you choose, all of those decisions, it should impact that. Okay, so another delight is the joy of meaningful service. So, you know, once you know yourself and you know your giftedness and your passions and your purpose, right? That's just not an end of itself. It's like, okay, I know who I am. No, you understand yourself, right? And that's gained through introspection, but that can find its full expression and joy in stewardship and service. And joy can be found, according to Parker Palmer, again, through authentic selfhood. And that leads to a path of authentic service to the world. And he says, our deepest calling is to grow into our own authentic selfhood, whether or not it conforms to some image of who we ought to be. As we do this, we will not only find joy that every human being seeks, we will also find our path of authentic service in the world. Frederick Buechner speaks of the joy of service. He's a really famous quote, and it says this. He says, what is vocation? Vocation is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. That's when you found, you know, your purpose. That's your vocation. Wolf describes work in the spirit as cooperation with God, all human work done in accordance with the will of God. He argues that cooperation with God is the preservation and transformation of the world. And while those with no religious faith can also teach to serve, and those with religious faith might never teach in the service of others, this connection of faith and service is often very meaningful. So this other delight, this third one, is called the satisfaction of critical engagement. And I use the term critical here to refer to being aware of our agendas and the context and students and the role of power. It involves the application of criteria for ethical practices as outlined, in my previous section, right? And a heightened awareness of our privilege and power as teachers. So put another way, it's that fascinating and messy business of what goes on inside and between people. Because as Stevick notes elsewhere, the acts and events of the classroom are always bound up in the relationships of power. So critical engagement, it's purposeful and mindful, and it's infused by all we do as teachers. As I said before, from choosing, where we work and what we teach, our teaching materials, the way we engage with our colleagues, what we research, how we grade, and a host of other actions. So it means asking critical questions and collecting data to reflect on what we are doing. It means asking ourselves on an ongoing basis, to what extent does what I am doing and the way I am doing it and why I'm doing it and who it benefits, how does this align with my spiritual beliefs, my spiritual identity? So it's the satisfaction of being challenged to live out your beliefs in a way that is marked by professionalism and sensitivity, and the opportunity to learn more about our students' beliefs and how that informs our understandings. It's also the challenge to help students engage critically in thinking about their beliefs and their spirituality and their faith, and to expose maybe misconceptions and to foster the desire to see something from someone else's perspective. Kanagaraja speaks openly about this tension of being both Christian and critical, and he contends that the tension can be both creative and constructive. He states that his faith gave him a coherent social vision that inspired him to commit himself to work for justice. And he found inspiration in the scripture to struggle for fundamental change in the social order, as he put it. And this gave him kind of these dual missions of working for both personal regeneration and social transformation. Yeah. So I have some concluding remarks and questions, and we're not going to have time for all these questions, and I don't even know that I'm going to read them all, but they're in my slide presentation, so you can find them and look at them later. But so in this talk, I've tried to address a concern, and this concern came from Stephanie Van Dreek in that very first book I did with Suresh Kanagaraja on critical and Christian English language educators in dialogue. And she kept asking, well, when is it appropriate? When is it not appropriate? So, to bring faith into the classroom. And that's what led me to write this chapter and to really think deeply about it. And, to put that question a different way, basically is, what are the limitations and possibilities of faith in the classroom? And how do teachers respect and explore them? And to answer these questions, I found it necessary to consider the context, right, of the classroom, and to examine the potential sources of teachers' moral and ethical decisions, meaning, remember what those were: our sacred texts, our reason, right, our experiences, our cultural traditions, right, as well as the external ethical codes of conduct and the mission statements of our institutions where we work, as well as even the ethical IRB principles that guide our research. I think all of those can help us process what is appropriate and not appropriate. But so to conclude, I provide us, that we'll continue to ponder this, and that you'll come to your own understanding of the potential of spiritual identity as pedagogy. So these are some questions. And we don't have time. I wish if I had a whole day workshop, we would be talking about these questions together and in groups and reporting back. But so which of any of these three dangers described in my talk or in the chapter are you facing? And how would you mitigate those dangers? And then I say, you know, what about the 3 delights? Which have you experienced? And then if not, you know, how could you seek to do that either through more introspection or more service or more critical application of what you're doing and reflection on that. And the third one, in determining a response to ethical dilemma you face, which of those 7 sources that we talked about will you draw from, and which will you give priority to when you make these decisions? I think it's important to think about our hot button. You know, our hot buttons, like if someone talks about that, oh, I get really angry or I respond, right? Or what are our agendas? And how can we be aware of ways where you might be imposing your views on a certain topic on your students? And how can you prevent that? And how can you learn more about your students' faith backgrounds and determining how this may inform your teaching? What professional ethical codes of conduct are you aware of that could help you? And what is the mission statement of your institution? What are the limitations and freedoms of a teacher's, you know, expression of faith in the classroom where you work? Other questions are, how do you maintain an ethical practice and allow your faith to inform your teaching, but without favoring students who are seeking to learn more about your faith beliefs? You know, and how can you present a broad perspective to include other faith beliefs and a balance of topics of which faith is included but not privileged in a course you are teaching? 10 asks, how can you expose misconceptions about your faith or other faiths and the diversity of those who hold these faiths within the confines of the courses that you teach, right? How can you get feedback from students, how they feel about the ways that faith and spirituality are maybe excluded from your classroom or included in a particular course, right? Can you describe an ethical dilemma that you might have encountered in teaching related to religion and described how you responded or might respond? And in answering that question I just asked, if you refer to that figure with those 7 different sources, you know, which sources were you drawing from? Was it more logic and reason? Was it your sacred text? Was it your experiences? And how did that inform your response? So we don't have time to discuss these now, but I have these here, so maybe you would consider these and think about these later. And finally, I'm just going to end with some thoughts, some final thoughts, and these are not mine. These are from my colleagues. So I'm going to share some of what they said about this topic with you to inspire you. This first one, she says, "Isn't that exactly what we should be trying to avoid?" she asked me. "Bringing religion into the classroom?" I felt like a rabbit trapped by a snake. If bringing religion into the classroom means expecting or even desiring students to convert to a certain religion or to become religious in a certain way, well, I agree. But my questioner then would be correct. This is exactly what we should try to avoid. Education is not about moralizing or coercion. It's about liberating and enabling students to work through the challenges of life, of the world. Through what teachers choose to include and emphasize, and what we choose to exclude and de-emphasize, we display our view of the world and what we value. Further, through how we interact with students and the qualities of our relationships with them, we not only display our view of the world, we also create it. And this was by Sid Brown in her book, A Buddhist in the Classroom. So we can draw from our spirituality to motivate students. Yeah. So here we have this one. This person says, you might know who it is. He said, "We have found that when the 3 key components examined in the study, divine call and vision, L2 learning vision, and a sacred text, when these 3 things are pooled, synchronized, and channeled meaningfully, They appear to generate an unusually high jet stream of motivation for language learning. Learners are caught in a powerful inner current that propels them to acquire language with exceptional intensity, persistence, and longevity. Who do you think said that? Yes, my good friend Zoltan Dornier. All right. You know, drawing from our spirituality to guide our teaching. So here's someone who talked about that. And these are actually from scripture. It says, we have renounced the secret and shameful ways. We do not use deception. It talks about identity and transparency. Everyone should be quick to listen and slow to speak. This talks about context and the importance of understanding our students. Be completely humble and gentle. This talks about being aware of power and empowering our students. Work as though you are working for the Lord. This talks about teaching with excellence and choice. And this was written by Kitty Perkison from Wong and Kanagaraja. We can also draw from our spirituality to sustain our practice, prevent burnout, right? The development of a non-native teacher's professional strength alone, without a clearly defined sense of direction or conviction, cannot sustain the growth as a language educator, nor does it offer the courage to teach in the face of various challenges against pedagogical credibility. My religious faith helped reshape my self-perceptions as a language teacher and renew my sense of purpose and direction as a non-native English-speaking teacher. This is written by John Liang in Wong and Kanagaraja. So our spirituality can also enlarge our paradigms. The speaker says, in other words, I have to always ask myself whether my approach in a pedagogy is a pedagogy of possibility or a pedagogy of closure. Thus, my faith finds an expression that is larger than one of merely preaching in the classroom or converting students. My pedagogical mission is the regeneration of everything in life, not just individuals, but social structures, environment, and knowledge paradigms. Furthermore, the way we do this is not only by word, but also by representing and regenerative values in my everyday classroom life. The attitude enables me to discuss across differences as I constantly seek to enlarge my paradigms and also be sensitive to progressive revelation. This was written by Suresh Kanagaraja and Wong and Kanagaraja. And finally, drawing from our spirituality to inspire our scholarship. So the question that people of faith in English language teaching can continue to ask themselves is this. And I already said it, but to what extent does what I am doing, or what I am researching, we could say, the way I'm researching it, why I'm researching it, and who my research benefits, right? Or we could change that, what I am teaching, the way I'm teaching, why I'm teaching, and who is benefited by my teaching, all of that. How does that align with my understanding of what Allah or God has revealed in sacred texts and in creation and what I believe He has called me to do? So that's it. So thank you for your invitation to share my thoughts on this very important topic. I wish you all the best in your conference as you reveal and apply spirituality values in English language teaching. Okay, I will stop sharing. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mary. So many things to reflect to our practice so far, especially because in my workplace right now, it is an Islamic-based higher education institution, which we have to deal with the values of Islamic religion as well, how to put it within the curriculum of our teaching practice. And you give some insight and also new perspectives about how can we draw our spirituality to get some benefits and some positive impacts on our practices or as a pedagogy. All right, so this is the time for question and answer session. I'd like to open this opportunity for 3 questions first. And you can please raise your hand through Zoom, raise your hand, and then you can mention your name and your institution, and then please what question that you want to ask for. Is it for Ahmar or for Mary? Okay, please, anyone, any question from the online participants? Or maybe from the face-to-face or offline participants?
Yes, Mr. Moli. Sorry, Mr. Hakim.
All right. Okay. Miss Wahyu. Okay, she is one of my college. Okay, please, this is your time. You can ask to either Ahmar or Mary or both of them.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and for all the presenters, Prof. Ahmar Mahboob and Professor Mary Wong. Yes, okay. Actually, Professor Ahmar Mahboob is my friend, but on Facebook. Yeah. Okay, yes. Okay, thank you for the wonderful and insightful lecturing today about spirituality in English language teaching. So I'm so interested in asking a question, especially for Dr. or Professor Mary Wong. Okay, and I listened to your presentations, like some, faith are learned for your students, including some respects, justice, beneficence, and others, and it's good. And based on your teaching experience, would you please tell us how do you incorporate or instill the religious values or faith into English language teaching in Christian higher education, and so that we can have a more detailed understanding about that, and we can imitate what should we do, especially in our education, in our higher education, IAIN Kudus. Thank you. And I'm wondering, yeah, so the quote from Parker Palmer, that good teaching cannot be restricted to technique. That's good. And then good teaching comes from identity and integrity from the teachers. So I will always remember that. That's good. Thank you. Yes.
Yes. So, okay, you can hear me, right? Right. Okay. So quickly, you just asked about how do we engage in faith integration? And I must say that at my institution, all institutions are different, but the teachers sign a faith statement. So the teachers come from a Christian perspective, although many different types of Christians, yes. But students don't need to be. So that's why we can have students who are Muslim and Buddhists and Christians and non-religious. And it makes it so wonderful that in the classroom, we can ask students to think about what are your, like for English language teaching, they do a language program design project, and they have to first articulate about what are your beliefs about not only language and learning, but about the world, about our purpose here, about who created us and where we're going next, because all of that actually would influence the way you teach and how you influence the teachers. So raising the awareness of our beliefs do impact, how what we do in the classroom, and to ask students to maybe, we ask them to write, what is your kind of philosophy of teaching, and how does your religious faith impact that, right? Whether that's, and then you can even do like those 13 questions I asked, right? You can get specific with that and ask those questions in the classroom. So those are ways, and we don't try to impose Christianity, because when people try to pretend they're Christian, it's terrible. We just like, no. Whatever your belief is, explore that, because that's going to be lived out in your teaching. And so you want to be aware of that and how it's informing what you're doing and why you're doing it. So those are some of the ways that we do our faith integration. I'd love to learn from you too. What were some of your ideas?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So I think there is a question on the chat box as well. It is from Risa Suryani from UIN Salatiga, and it is addressed for Professor Ahmar. The question is yours, I think.
Yes, I actually responded to the question on the chat too,
All
because
right.
the question was, how do we turn what, because I've been in the talk today, I was just sharing more of the poems and more of the issues around and sort of some of the theoretical ideas. And the question is, how do you actually convert all of that into a pedagogical approach? So that will need another whole day of workshopping, or maybe even a whole semester of it. So what I've done is I've shared a couple of resources that you can have a look at. And you're welcome to email me and ask me any further questions around this. Actually, now that I have the floor, can I actually ask Mary a question?
Yeah. It is discussion session, so
Okay, Ahmar. Go for it.
All right. I mean, I enjoyed your talk, and I'm familiar with some of the work that you have been doing around these things. When you talk about the various sources of moral and ethical sort of understandings, you had professional areas, so the professional sort of institutions and things, and you had IRB. Now, isn't IRB about legal areas and aspects rather than moral and ethical? And don't we separate out legal from the other two? Because legal issues are a whole different game. And most of the legal frameworks in the world today were designed in or through a European language. So it is embedded in a European sort of categories and classificatory systems, which is actually a problem. But that's how, that's IRB sort of thing is. Now, for the professional thing, like, so let's say, for example, there's a professional organization called Linguistics Association of X or Y or Z. Now, they might have their professional guidelines, but isn't it sometimes important to ask whether the profession itself is ethical? So is it ethical to go out and collect data on somebody's language and document it in grammars that people cannot understand? So is it that the profession itself can be unethical?
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. In fact, I'm writing an article right now. I'm writing a chapter for a book on towards my chapter is called Towards a More Ethical Stance for Collaborative International Research. And the issues around IRB are incredible, because so I totally agree with you that just the issues of IRB, when we go into Myanmar and ask people to do X, Y, and Z, they're like, wait, no, this is unethical. What are you talking about? Right? So yes, I like that critical stance. I wasn't saying to adopt them. I was just saying, let's look at the issue of fairness, of justice, of doing good. Those are the three principles that I was looking at within, and I didn't make those up. So I was saying, I got these looking at the IRB, and I noticed that my colleague and I, we're both Christians, but we respond opposite on the same issue. And I think because he draws more from trying to do good, and I'm like, no, we have to be fair to, anyway, so that was the issue. But I totally agree with you, Ahmar, and I'm going to be sending you a draft of my chapter for input because I really like your stance on that, on, how do we do more ethical, research, because there's so many ethical problems when we're engaging in collaborative research in other countries and with locals, and how can we make that more equitable in terms of who gets to name the questions that we're researching, those kinds of questions. So yeah, I'm on the same page with you there. Thank you for bringing that up. Good job. I wish I had a good question for you. I have to think about that.
Yes, you should. All right, another question, please. From the online participants. All right, so one's over there. Wait.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Alfunima. It's so a wonderful presentation, or I think it is a lecturing for me. And yeah, both of you, thank you very much for both of you, Mr. Ahmar and Ma'am Mary. I would like to ask about the wonderful poem from Ahmar that actually I'm a lecturer, I'm a teacher, and so I've read your poem, so wonderful, and it's really have a deep meaning. Yeah, so I think it's really difficult to to make, especially for us as a foreign teacher, foreign language teacher like us. And I also wonder how our students actually to find out the meaning. But it is really good if we can create such a wonderful poem, because actually a word or language really language. So really can have a deep meaning. Yeah, it is really worked. Language is really worked, and how to realize the good poem, such like Ahmar, for our students as a foreign language. English is a foreign language, so I would like to ask the diction. As a teacher and also students, that English is as a foreign language for us. Thank you very much. It's very inspiring, and there are many sources. And for Mary Wong, actually, I do really agree with a good statement and also motivation for us. There are many motivation and quotes, from Mary Wong. So really, thank you. Thanks for a million. Actually, in our institutions, there is a correlation between your statement. I do agree with the identity and integrity. From identity to be integrity. Actually, if we correlate with the spirituality in teaching, we also have the spirituality in as our identity, especially in teaching, and it will be the integration of being a mission, because we do have such a term that teaching is a teaching is a purpose for us, for every people. So we have to teach, we have to learn, we have to seek knowledge. It is obligation in our religion. So it will make or create integrity. Being a teacher, being students, and being humans. So but actually, I think if we can use that to be our identity, it's really good. But maybe every person have a difference, or how they can use the learning or the faith for them. So actually, for me, how to inbuild or to our students, for to the peoples, it is really relating the pedagogy, the how teacher can teach the students that have that can, what is it? Make the learning or the faith, yeah, that will be to be their character, to be in their character itself, not only the word itself. Thank you. Maybe you have many tips, yeah, how to teach our students that they can really take the meaning, the true meaning from the learning or the faith, yeah, the faith, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Those are great questions. Now, let me just start off by saying I am also not a mother tongue speaker of English. So creativity in language, it doesn't have to relate to what your mother tongue is. You know, essentially with poetry or any kind of creativity, it's the idea that you want to create. Once you have something to say, you find ways of saying it. Just like we do always. Now, I will also point out that, and this connects also to the research question, which I also replied through the chat group, but even with my students, I get them to do creative thinking and creative writing and artwork. So one of the things that I wanted to share here is, you know, I had a student a couple of years ago who came over to, and he wanted to study cross-cultural communication, and he wanted to carry out a survey of issues around cross-cultural communication in Chile, where he's from. And as I said to you guys earlier, I don't see why we should do any surveys because numbers don't apply to sociosemiotics. So what I said, listen, if you want to deal with issues of migrant communication, cross-cultural communication, and all this stuff, why don't you write a children's storybook? And let's use our understanding of multimodality and translanguaging and all the stuff that we do theoretically. Let's apply it in order to create a resource. Because once you create a resource, the resource can be used, right? And in this case, he wrote this beautiful little book called The Ribbit Pond. I sent you the link already. And he wrote it first in English and Spanish. And then we had it translated by colleagues. There's also an Indonesian version, right? It's 26 languages already. And the list of languages is growing, right? So I'll just show you here. So a little part of it. You can read the Indonesian version yourself. I won't read it for you. And then last spring, a group of croc frogs arrived at the Ribbit Pond. They came from a faraway land, from the mountains and beyond. They traveled day, they traveled night, in the rain, in the sun, until they finally found a new home at the Ribbit Pond. Notice, it's also a poem. And the whole book's a poem. And I won't read the whole of it to you. You can read it yourself. It's a resource that he created, and then it's available to everybody. So what we do is we get people to create resources. And notice we're using bilingual. So there's no reason why you cannot integrate Bahasa into your English language classrooms and get students to create bilingual resources. Because we need them, right? Our children in our countries, they need bilingual resources. And not just in English, but Bahasa in all other languages, right? And you can do it here. See, for example, you can go Bahasa in Burmese, Chinese, Croatian, Greek, Hindi, Khmer, Macedonian, Malay, Punjabi, Sindhi, Urdu, they're all here, right? So you can create these resources. And then I also get my students, other students, once this resource is created, I get them to create additional resources on how do you teach Chinese through the Ribbit Pond, or how do you teach Vietnamese through the Ribbit Pond, right? So if you look at this one, for example, learning Chinese with the Ribbit Pond, it's a student who created all these resources, right? So it's a resource to teach Chinese. And, you know, I don't know how many resources there are to teach Bahasa Indonesian, right? We can actually combine them, use our understandings of translingualism and all this stuff, and create all these resources where we teach them vocabulary, we teach them grammar, we teach them even how to do strokes and writing in case of Chinese. And then, of course, the student who created the Ribbit Pond, his dissertation, his master's thesis was the making of the Ribbit Pond. How did he actually create it? And I'll just show you how he wrote his dissertation. His dissertation is not chapter 1, chapter 2. It doesn't have an introduction and a literature review and a methodology. It doesn't exist. Instead, what we have are units. Unit 1, the Ribbit Pond, a credible project, planning my project, how do you do it? And then it has got activities. Unit 2, using the credible approach to research. It's like, how do you actually create this? How do you do this? And how did he do it? Then Unit 2, theories, and how did it apply to it? How did he use various theories to create this material, right? So the verbal mode in the book, the visual mode in the book. Then Unit 3 is aligning the verbal and the visual mode, combining all out. So when you read this book, when you read his dissertation, his thesis, he is actually teaching you how to do it, right? So we also can change the genres in which we write our dissertations. We don't have to stick to the traditional ways of doing dissertations and doing things, because we as teachers, as professors at our university, we can change these things. And if we change them thoughtfully and in order to empower our communities and our students, our children, then we are making a real impact in the communities, right? And I'll just share you another resource of how to do it, like Subaltern Practice, a practical guide. How do you actually do all of these things? So a lot of the things that I talked about here, like about the material, biological, socio-semiotic, the multi-sensory systems, that's only just the introduction. And then it goes in, how do you actually make your students to create this stuff? How do you actually make them creative? Because a lot of our creativity is hammered out of us in our traditional schools. So we have to bring that creativity back into our students and enable them to do it. It can be done. And these are just a couple of resources that you can look at. And again, I'll be happy to work with you further. Okay, I'm going to stop and let Mary respond to her question.
I'm not sure what the question was at this point, but I think she was just saying that she was very grateful for all the quotes. And Ahmar, I love how you said, she was asking, I think, too, of how can, we inspire our students to think about how their faith, impacts what they do and how they do it. I think it would be fun to have the students, bring a principle from their sacred text, from a story. And then how can you take that principle and do what this student has done, Ahmar, to actually make a children's story out of it that embodies that principle that they found, from their religious text. And, I'm thinking, it could be a principle that we find both in the Quran and in the Bible, right? I mean, similar principles that could be found and that you ask students to. So in other words, the teacher doesn't have to do all this work. The teacher doesn't say, oh, how am I going to help my students, do faith integration? You ask them to do it in creative ways and you'll be blown away, like Ahmar was with this Ribbit Pond, and how exciting that where that went, but just making them more aware of, okay, so how do you apply? Because I think that spiritual faith is such a powerful force, right? And so if you can somehow have it so it motivates students and teachers to think about how they can, do their work, better, I think that's a really good thing to do. So get your students to do it and ask them to find ways to do it by giving them some examples like Ahmar just did. Yeah, thank you.
Can I just add to that, Mary? I wanted to touch on two things here. One, you talk about the Quran and the Bible, and of course, these are all religious texts and we talk about them. But notice that in terms of the relationships between religions, these are all Abrahamic religions, right? So Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. In fact, to be a Muslim, you have to believe in Jesus, and you have to believe in Moses as well. You have to believe in Torah, and you have to believe in the Bible. You cannot just be a Muslim by saying it's only in the Quran. You can't. You have to respect and believe in all of those texts. So, you will see that actually there's a hereditary relationship between them. And, the category, it's the problem often comes in because when we create category called religion. Now, religion, as I say, it is only performance. It's action of integrity. But the category of religion is a category. And notice the word religion, we borrow it. It's borrowed into Urdu, it's borrowed into Hindi, it's most likely borrowed into Bahasa as well. Because we don't actually have a category called religion. It doesn't exist. So we have to borrow a category from the English language or another European language in order to deal with this construct. Now, it is a category that is a problem, right? It is the category that's the problem because the category enables divisions. So this is one thing when I keep saying that it's the academic knowledge structures that create divide and rule. So divide and rule is not just a political strategy, it's actually embedded within the ways that we create knowledge. So when we create a category called religion, we enable division and we enable divide and rule. When we create a category called culture, we enable divisions and we enable divide and rule. When we create a category called language, we enable divisions and we enable divide and rule. So, you know, and notice all of these categories come out of colonization. They didn't exist before then. You know, in my language, there is no concept of religion as a category. We have three different concepts in my Boli. It's like Iman, Mazhab, and Deen. There are three very distinct concepts, and none of them is religion. But when we mistranslate religion into either, say, mistranslate it to Mazhab or something, we are actually harming ourselves. So it's extremely important that we realize that religion as a category is an instrument of divide and rule. Religion as a practice is simple. It's just the practice of integrity and honesty. And the rest of it is your cultural ways of doing things. And they vary geographically, right? So the way that Islam is practiced in Indonesia is not the way it's practiced in Saudi Arabia or Pakistan or Nigeria or other parts of the world. It's practiced differently because those are regional variations based on the geography. Right? But when we translate these into symbols and name religions, and the name religion then comes with their own structures and their own structures have their own functions. And that's essentially what all of it does. Now, this actually takes us to another point that all colonial knowledge, not just in religious studies, but also linguistics, also biology, all colonial sciences operate in only two ways. Way number one, they work through genealogy. So they have language families, you have a species of different kinds in biology, you have different religions that are, for example, Abrahamic religion, that's genealogy. So that's one way in all disciplines. And the second way is to do structural or functional analysis. So whether it is language, we have structural, it's structural grammars and we have functional grammars. Exactly the same thing. So every discipline in the colonial ways of knowledge making operates exactly the same way. And notice both of them are divisive. They divide groups and they divide people, right? It's the same construct even in sociology when we think of family. So a family doesn't exist in my language because family implies mother, father, and children. It's a divisive construct. It divides us at every generation, right? So brothers and sisters grow up together, but then they have their own families and their children will have their own families. Every generation we get divided. Notice it comes through a sociological construct called family. Again, we borrow the word family into our own language. We don't have that word. We have Khandan, we have Kunba, we have Dabbar, we have Parivar. We have hundreds of different ways of categorizing our sociological systems. None of them is family because family is based on genealogy. It's a really strange thing to do. You know, why would you take biology to create sociological systems? It just doesn't make sense. But yet we do, because that's the only two ways that the colonial knowledge making operates. So, you know, we really have to sort of think around these questions because, you know, it takes us away from the category religion, but it doesn't take us away from spirituality because that is very much tied to who we are and how we engage with the world and everything around us.
Yeah.
But
Ahmar, I remember we had a discussion. I don't know if you remember it, but we were at a TESOL conference and we said, what is spirituality? And there was a man and he had a drink and he said, spirits are in my glass. And anyway, we had some really good, deep conversations around this and it was fun. And what you're saying right now really reminds me of the work that I just did in Vietnam on translanguaging, because the whole idea of translanguaging is there is no language. When you say there is a language, what is a language? It's the language repertoire. Like, you know, where does Mandarin stop and Cantonese start and all these other, you know. So when you're saying this, I'm relating it to kind of the theories of translanguaging, and then it makes more sense to me. So I like what you're saying. I don't know if I can accept everything, that categories are all bad, but I'm liking that you're pushing this and making us really think about these things, because I do see it in translanguaging. Yeah, there is no such thing as language. Why are we defining it that you can't speak this language in this language when, you know, it's more the language repertoire and stuff. So I'm hearing what you're saying, and I will still think about it, but I still like the categories. But I like the idea of, because actually the idea of religion, but the idea of spirituality, why does spirituality just so kind of warms our heart, but religion, we're like, no. And I think it's because, like you say, religion divides, right? Where spirituality maybe connects us to, you know, a supreme being or the other or one another, while religion can divide. So thanks for those comments. I'll continue to think about them. Don't know if I can accept everything you're saying, but I really like you make me think.
It actually reminds me when I read the introductory part of your book with Ahmar. It is about how you divide between religion and spirituality, because they are different. And when you have a conference, a TESOL conference at that time, and then someone just say that this is not about spiritual, this is about Christianity, which is religion. So it's totally different between when we talk about religion and spirituality, because spirituality, maybe we have a common sense or a universal values that agreed by people with that they believe in religion, or that they believe in God, for example. And it's quite different with the concept of religion itself, which is there are so many divisions, like what Ahmar explained before. And it is very interesting to know that they have to be separated and they have a different kind of discussion. So anything that you want to add, maybe Ahmar or Mary, or maybe is there any question? Any other questions? One more last question. Let's see.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
I'm interested in, you know, the topic of this conference. So you've had a conference for 2 years on the same topic. Is that right? Or is this the first one on spirituality?
Oh, this one is the first one in spirituality, because we have a different topic each year.
I see.
So yeah. So this year we decide to come with spirituality, because as what I have said in the beginning of this conference, that actually this university or this institution where I work right now, and the organizer of this conference is under the Ministry of Religious Affairs of Indonesian Republic at the time. And we have a kind of priority program for religious moderation. So we have to instill, we have to teach, and we have to put the religious moderation and also especially Islamic teachings and values within our curriculum in higher education. So that's why we bring this topic up for the conference about spirituality in English language teaching, because it's something new for us. And I think it's still a few like an writer from Indonesia that they write about, that they do research on spirituality and ELT. And I think it's we glad to have both of you here today and give us some new perspective and also insight that I think there are so many things that that we should do now, and we should work on this topic. All right. Is there any last word, maybe, or Ahmar or Mary, that you want to...
I wouldn't mind reading one more poem to you guys before
we
wind up.
Sure.
Right, and this is a very different. It's also one of my good poems, and I'll share the screen with you here. So, can you see the screen now? Cool. I guess so.
Yeah.
And that I will leave you with this.
Can you zoom in, maybe?
Gosh, it's a good question. I don't know if I can really, but because it's a note. I don't think I can actually.
Yeah, but it's okay.
Sorry.
It's still,
Yeah, come here, Guddu. I want to share something. Yes, Papa, Guddu said as he walked over. I want to share a magic trick. A trick that helps us in our darkest times. Wow, Guddu was excited. Yes, it is something I learned from my elders as they did from theirs. What is it, Papa? Guddu was curious. Toba. Toba is the magical word. It's a magical word. What does it mean? It means nothing. It is an action. You do it when you realize your mistakes and want to fix them. How does one do this, Papa? Guddu asked, quieter than his usual self. One holds and pulls one's ears lightly, not to hurt oneself, but to feel, and promise not to do them again. Like this, Guddu asked as he pulled his ears. Yes, and then one says Toba, and one repeats this action 3 times. Guddu performed Toba thrice and then asked, and then everything is fixed? Not at all, Guddu. Nothing is fixed by Toba. You still need to take action to fix things. And most importantly, you must never, never, ever make the same mistake again. If you do, your Toba is cancelled. Oh, Papa, I know I should not have lied earlier. I ate the sweets on top of the cupboard, and I just did Toba, and I will never do it again. I was wondering where the sweets went. I'm so glad you told me and promised not to lie again. We all make mistakes, Guddu. If we learn from them and never repeat them, we can move on and become stronger. And always remember, sugar is a poison and an addiction. We pay for it and it slowly kills us.
Thank you. That was great.
yeah, that was great. Thanks, Ahmar. All right, Mary, do you want to say something for the last?
Oh, that's sweet of you. No, just thank you for inviting me. And
No, we thank you.
yeah. And if you post any of maybe I'll take a look at all the sessions that you're doing tomorrow or later today.
Oh, later today. I think it's at 11:30 right now, or 30 minutes after this we start to begin the presentation, and we decide to put it on 1-day conference right now.
Oh, okay. How many sessions do you have? I'm so curious.
Oh, there are 3 plenary sessions, and each session will be there will be like 6 presenters, up to 7 presenters. So if you have time, just we will break out this room into 3 breakout rooms, and the first breakout room will be focused on Islamic related topics, and the second will be more on language teaching, and the third one is more on the technological stuff.
Okay.
So yeah.
Well, great. Well, it's pretty late here, and I have to get up really early tomorrow morning.
Yeah, sure. We will have a recorded session for
Okay.
for all of this conference on our YouTube, and I will share the links afterwards with the certificate as well to all of you, and then I'll inform if it's already done.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you all. I really appreciated your attention.
All right, thank you. So wait, we will have a photo session. Even though it's online, but we prepare to make a group photo session as always. All right, the operator, are you ready? Okay, I will count out. We will take like 3 pictures. Everyone, please prepare your position, and please open or turn on your camera so that your beautiful and handsome face can be shown here. All right. Siap? Are you ready? Okay, not yet. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Again, wait. Okay, next, please turn on your camera, everyone. 3, 2, 1. The third. 3, 2, 1. All right. Thank you so much, everyone who has participating in this event. Oh, the last one. Okay, sorry. The last slide. sorry. Last slide. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Okay, great. Masih ada? Is there anything left? Oh, no. Oh, all right. So, okay, thank you so much again, Mary and Ahmar, for your time, for your willingness to share your knowledge and experience with us. And I will let you know if the certificate is ready and also the recorded session for this webinar, and also after this, the plenary session. I will send you an email afterwards. Okay, thank you so much, Ahmar and Mary.
Thank you,
Nice
guys.
to see you, Ahmar.
I do apologize if any mistakes or maybe for the
All
delay,
good.
the 30-minute
good.
delay in
All
the
good.
of this conference. Okay, thank you so much. See you on the next occasion.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Ahmad.
Bye-bye. Really appreciate it.
Alright. Terima kasih Bapak Dekan sudah berkenan untuk menemani kami untuk selama webinar ini.
Okay.
Kemudian akan kami beri waktu kepada presenter yang sudah kami infokan sebelumnya di grup WA bahwa akan ada sesi presentasi. Kita mulai berapa menit lagi?
Presentasi apa nih?
5 menit. Disiapkan dulu ya. Oh yeah, so we will break this Zoom meeting into 3 breakout rooms. And for all the presenters, please prepare yourself and join to the room that the committee has decided or has divided before on the conference guidebook. And for participants, for every participants, you are welcome to please join us into breakout rooms, and you can choose between breakout rooms 1, 2, or 3. And you can listen to the presentation for about 5 minutes. So every breakout room will be consisted of 6 up to 7 presenters, and each presenters will present their paper for 5 to 7 minutes. So the committee will prepare the breakout room for 5 to 10 minutes. Jadi setiap presenter silakan mempersiapkan slide-nya masing-masing, dan untuk yang sudah mengumpulkan slide akan kami persiapkan sesuai dengan breakout room yang sudah dibagikan. Alright, thank you.
you.